what's going on in the skies. And there's lots of people I speak with, and basically the agreement is we've noticed that there's aircraft in the skies emitting particles that are creating clouds, and a lot of those particles are dangerous to human health, dangerous to plants, dangerous to water. There's a lot of concerns. What's going on in our skies? And it's at all levels too. It's not just at one altitude, it's at different altitudes. So I've been coming across people very, very concerned about this. And basically what's happened is enough people came to me because they knew I was an activist, and they knew that I would stand up about important issues. And so they came to me and said, would you please stand up about this issue? And so I just decided in January, okay, it's time. I will stand up about this issue. I do want to bring your attention to some of my other initiatives. So many of you know me as an activist, and you know that I've been involved in multiple projects pushing back against different things, and I have different ways of being an activist. So I've hosted a lot of rallies, for example, tons and tons of rallies. And I started in 2021 because I had concerns about government restrictions. But in addition to rallies, I also do petitions, and I also work on political action. So I emphasize to people that if you disagree with restrictions or you disagree with certain laws, there are ways to get things changed. You can make the change. And part of that is engaging with our elected representatives and doing it in a professional and effective manner. And so one of the things I've done is I have joined the governing party of my province. I have also joined the governing party of my nation. So in the case of my province, it's the United Conservative Party of Alberta. I've also no, I shouldn't say I joined the governing party of my nation. I joined the party I'd like to see as the governing party of my nation. I joined the Conservative Party of Canada. So I'm very optimistic. Once we have a federal election, we'll have some good results there. So what I encourage you to do is to take action in your own ways. So that might be joining a party. It might be taking other actions. And so what I'd like to share with you now is one of my initiatives, which is called Conservatizing Municipal Councils and School Boards. You will learn strategies for influencing policymakers, also strategies for replacing them. And what's particularly important about this in Alberta right now is this is an election year in Alberta. October 20th, 2025 is the day we could transform every municipal council in Alberta and every school board. That's the day. So we can get people with our values elected at the local level on municipal councils and school boards. So make sure you take down that link, tinyurl.com/conservatizing, and make sure you register for Thursday. And these meetings happen once per month, typically on the 27th of each month. So I'm very, very hopeful that you'll register for that. Now, again, just so that you're aware, this meeting is being recorded in part so you can watch it again later, but also so that the people who couldn't be here get to watch it. One of the ways it may be released is through Freedom Calendar. So the Freedom Calendar website is freedomcalendar.net, and it's looking promising that we will have the recording released through that website. Another thing to think about with regards to freedomcalendar.net is that if you log into that website on a regular basis, you will get to see about other events like this. So whether it's online events, in-person events, there are just so many options for events that you can support, participate in. Maybe you even want to sponsor some of them. It costs money to do stuff like this. So people like me who host appreciate when someone chooses to be a supporter and sponsor it. And so make sure on a regular basis, I'd say at least once a week, especially if you're in Alberta, you tune into freedomcalendar.net and you see what's happening there, freedomcalendar.net. I'll post it in the chat for you so that you have it, and then we will officially get started. So freedomcalendar.net is that website you want to check at least once a week. Our next meeting regarding geoengineering will be on Tuesday, March 25th, same time, same place, and it's the same registration link. Another thing I'm looking at doing is hosting monthly meetings on the topic of improving your presentation skills for when you speak to your local municipal council or any elected representative, really. And so those will be monthly meetings, likely starting first week of April. Plus, I'm looking at hosting monthly meetings where we teach you about parliamentary procedure. If you are serious about making a difference, you might be thinking of running for office and then participating in meetings as an elected representative. Well, one of the things you have to know is parliamentary procedure, because there's a certain format to how meetings are run. There's a chairman, that you make a motion, you can amend a motion. There's a whole process to it. You can't just walk into the meeting and say everything that's on your mind. I wish we could, but we can't. There's a certain format. So you need to learn how to respect that format and use that format. And that's called parliamentary procedure. Some people know it as Robert's Rules of Order. So I'll be hosting meetings on Robert's Rules of Order once per month starting in April. And because I want to empower you to make a difference. Now, we get to hear from our first presenter. This is a privilege to have this guest here. He is Tennessee State Representative Monty Fritz. He was first elected to Tennessee House of Representatives in November of 2022, and he's been working hard. He assumed office in January of 2023. He earned a Bachelor of Science at Liberty University. He has his Master's of Business Administration from the University of Tennessee. And my reason for inviting him as a guest today is I found out about what I consider to be one of his greatest accomplishments, because I don't know his full list of accomplishments, but it's something called House Bill 2063. House Bill 2063 was passed, it was introduced in the Tennessee House of Representatives in January of 2024. It was passed in April of 2024, and then it became law July 1st of 2024. And you might be aware that there's been other states working on similar bills because they're concerned about what's been going on in the skies. And we need some legislation to protect our air from pollution and protect the people. So there's a lot of people working on this, but Tennessee is special to me because they're the first, based on my research, they're the first to pass this legislation. So I am just so incredibly happy to have Monty Fritz here. Welcome, Monty Fritz. I'm so pleased you could be here and serve as a guest presenter today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Benita. It's good to be with you tonight. I will talk about a little bit perhaps how we got the bill started last year and the bill that we're moving forward with this year, and maybe a little bit of how we arrived there and why I was compelled to do so, if that works for you.
Monty, that works wonderfully for me. Share away.
So, as you said, I got into politics starting in 22. Really unhappy with some of the things that had taken place in my country and in my state with all the COVID mess. And I'm a constitutionalist. I try to make that the first filter by which I make decisions on legislation. Physical conservative. Very much so, I think. At least I would tell you that. This was not something I ran on. Geoengineering was not something I ran on. And I will talk in broader terms rather than just the skies. I've become somewhat ground zero for all things geoengineering, chemtrail, contrail, it seems. And we took a much broader approach. I'll get to that in just a minute, the way we wrote our legislation. But one of the other representatives came to me, and Norm, I had a little bit of a technical background in what I had done for a living, asked me to take on this piece of legislation. And to be honest with you, in January of 24, when I took this up, had you asked me what I thought about geoengineering, I would have told you that I thought carbon capture was a farce, and some of these things that we're doing to push the climate alarmist agenda were just a farce. And that's probably as far as I would have gone with the topic. But as I started to research this, some of the links that I had sent you, Benita, became evident that weather modification is something that we've been doing for some time in the United States and around the world. And so that concerned me. I found lots of federal government documents that indicated that we're spending U.S. tax dollars on this, some of these crazy schemes, things like stratospheric aerosol injection and marine cloud brightening, just to attempt to reduce the sunlight that's reaching the earth, which struck me as a bit odd when most of the same crowd that was wanted to advance that concept were telling us we had to all to go to solar energies. And so anyways, we found documents from the previous White House that were pressing for this weather modification and geoengineering, everything again from cloud seeding to the marine cloud brightening or the solar radiation management. And it left me a bit, if you will, just aghast that we were spending U.S. tax dollars doing this. And there were perhaps lots of private groups that were engaged in the same thing. And so we drafted up the bill. The language that you see in House Bill 2063 were words that really initiated, I think, in this office. The concept didn't, but the words did. We worked closely with our Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to make sure that we had a piece of legislation that wouldn't unnecessarily harm legitimate businesses. I am of the opinion that cloud seeding and weather modification are not legitimate businesses in America. I think they don't have any constitutional footing where we, the people, have agreed to be test subjects to someone's science project, if you will. And I think they're immoral because just on the basic, simple fact that anything that we put in our skies is eventually going to find its way either into our lungs, on our skin, in our water, in our food supplies. And that's just for the sole and express purpose. The way you'll see the legislation is written, it says that it's prohibited for the express purpose in our Clean Air Act that we added this language to. And so certainly we have legitimate industries in both of our nations that have some type of emission. And, today in America, I'm sure you do the same thing in Canada, we do lots of filtering and scrubbing processes to make sure that those factory processes that do have an emission, some type of flue gas or something, they're scrubbed and filtered, and we do really well at that. And so to just for the express purpose of changing the weather, I just think that's an immoral thing. So that's the approach we took. We did use geoengineering rather than any one of those specific forms, and kept that under the broader definition of things to go from the cloud seeding all the way to some of those things that I might consider extreme, that we're trying to dim the intensity of the sunlight hitting the earth. And it sounds a bit science fiction when you first hear about those concepts. Really, it did to me. But we did some research and we found, in the 60s that the U.S. Government had done some of the cloud seeding in Southeast Asia. Research showed that we had 8 to 10 states, Western states, that actively use cloud seeding today. To be honest, there were lots of skeptics about the bill. Most of the skeptics were typically the liberal folks, many of whom are friends of mine, but folks that are more on the left, if you're a right-left person in their political view of things. And they just had a hard time at accepting that this was a real thing. And these are the folks that most routinely tout that we must have clean air and clean water. And certainly as a very conservative person, I hold that to be true, that we must do all that we can to protect the environment and subdue the earth, not abuse the earth. Right? And so anyways, that quickly changed after we got through the first or second committee with the bill. and it changed to a denial. It changed in the press here that reported on and covered the story. Initially, the press took on an approach that, this is all a conspiracy theory. This never happens. And after we got through, I think, the second committee, the press started to change quickly and pivot on the point. And it was, well, sure, we're doing cloud seeding and some weather modification, but it's good for us. And it all went back to that, we're saving the climate from this impending climate crisis that the Al Gores of the world have been predicting. Seems like every decade they make a new prediction for about 10 years out. But anyways, we had someone come and testify against the bill, a young man that very bright, very nice young man who runs a cloud seeding company. And he was, he validated the fact that we are monetizing the harvesting of additional rain. And so he talked through the chemicals that they used. And of course, you do the research and you see certainly the silver iodide becomes something that's talked about. Propane used to form additional crystalline structures apparently in the clouds, and it increases the rainfall or snowfall that some of the western states are able to seize when the clouds pass over them. We found it interesting as our research continued that Tennessee had law in our emergency code, in emergency management code, in weather modification back as early as like 2002. Code had been issued that our governor and the agencies were empowered to do studies about things like floodplains for emergency management, and it included those two words, which I thought was unusual: weather modification. Again, that's a circa 2002 piece of legislation. So we got it through the floor. It passed in the Senate. Went into law in May of last year, and we've gotten lots and lots of calls. I think there were some folks that were expecting that they'd never see another contrail or chemtrail in the sky after this law was passed. And we here in the United States, I know you have some other Americans on this call, but innocence, the assumption or presumption of innocence, is tremendously important in anything criminal. And as I've already disclosed to you all, I think it's a criminal thing to purposefully inject silver iodide or barium or aluminum or any of these polymers that are reportedly being used for marine cloud brightening or stratospheric aerosol injections, because at some point in time, your children or my grandchildren are going to breathe, eat, or drink those substances, right? And that's just a risk that we shouldn't take. And so we have started down the path this year of House Bill 1112, Bill 1112, and it really outlines a bit of a pathway to prosecution for these crimes. We have addressed both the person convicted, if convicted, of performing geoengineering in Tennessee, and the person who's supplying the chemicals, if they knowingly supplied the chemicals for a geoengineering effort. And we assigned prosecutorial authorities to our attorney general in this bill and to our district attorneys. Now, this will go to its first committee next week. And again, maintaining all the same requirements for the proof of guilt, and all the evidentiary standards would still be applied. It is a new thing, so that's still going to be difficult because this is a bit of a new frontier, if you will. But we're encouraged that we've played a very small part in maybe increasing the conversability of this topic. I think I've worn all of the conspiracy theory hats and been accused of that over the last year or so. And so we've broken ice there, and we've made it a little more comfortable for people to talk about it, I think. Several other states, as you mentioned, have contacted us. We've had contacts from Iowa and Indiana, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Florida, I think both North and South Carolina. And I know there have been some bills initiated in some of those states, and in some states of folks that I haven't talked to them. Senate Bill 56 in Florida is really close or really similar, I guess, into the legislation we use for House Bill 2063 in Tennessee that became law. And as I understand it, they've made it through the first committee there, and I'm not sure if they have another committee or a larger committee that subcommittee disposes into, or if it goes to their full body. But it has become something that others are willing to take on, and I think that's important. I think, back to those two standards that I think that we violate in allowing for the purpose of geoengineering, whether it's sunlight reflection or increased rainfall or decreased rainfall or changing weather patterns or whatever these crazy people are trying to do, to put chemicals into the atmosphere for the express purpose of that. I think in these United States and in this state of Tennessee, that's an unconstitutional thing. And I think it's an immoral thing. And so we're going to, as long as I'm in office, I'm going to keep pushing for this and trying to raise the awareness of it. And if we can, with due process, and maintain all the evidentiary standards and requirements, if this becomes something that is prosecuted, I think that's important because, again, you or I didn't agree to be test subjects for this. We didn't. I'm not aware. I didn't anyways. I didn't sign anything saying it's okay for you to spray me with aluminum or polymers or silver iodide. And then the moral issue of it, and I'll offer this analogy from time to time when I talk to people about, I'll offer a couple. Maybe if time permits, I'll share them both with you. But the first one is this. If we have many neighboring states in Tennessee, if you understand our geography, we're surrounded by other states here in the United States. And so if any one of those states we're going to be transporting on the interstate highway systems, Interstate 40 runs from east to west, from Memphis to the North Carolina line in Tennessee. And so if we had legal commerce, lawful commerce coming down I-40, and we were transporting some substance routinely, and we were transporting it in containers that leaked a biohazard or a chemical hazard onto our roadways in Tennessee, and we discovered that, and there was a health issue with it, we would take action toward the company to tell them to stop the leakage. Or I think we would probably have our government officials would reach out to the government officials for the originating state, whether that's Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, whatever, and Carolinas, and ask them to stop that because it was harming the citizens of Tennessee. And so I think that same principle applies in this. I would offer that under God's created order of things, that clouds are formed generally over large bodies of water by the evaporative process of the sun. And those, by the laws of nature, those clouds distribute rain. If you're a Christian like I am, you believe that it rains on the just and the unjust. But God sometimes blesses peoples with rain, and sometimes he punishes them for their sin with withholding the rain. So you got accounts of that in the Bible. So I think rainfall and who gets it is a God thing, not a man thing. And I think that's part of the big battle that we see in our world today. It's not unique to America. I'm sure it's not unique to Canada and America. I think it's on every continent that there's an ongoing battle between the secular humanist and the creationist. And the creationist worldview that the founders of the United States had was that they sought God's blessing on things, and we trusted him to manage those laws of nature, and we were to do right by him and by our fellow man. The secular humanist thinks that they can pull together their talents and control everything now, apparently up to and including the weather. And so I think there's a root of the Tower of Babel in the way the secular humanist views the world today. And certainly I think the technologies that we're gifted with are blessings from God Almighty as well. But I think that certainly man has a propensity sometimes to abuse those blessings. And I think in Monty's humble opinion, we're doing that with this weather modification stuff, and we should stop it. And so that's kind of what we're set on to do here in Tennessee. I am, anyway.
Thank you so much, Monty. I have a number of questions here. Hopefully we can get through a few. One of them is, will it be easier with Trump administration to address things going forward, especially with Mr. Kennedy?
I hope so. I have seen that RFK Jr. has commented on some of the, he's very health oriented. I think that's going to be good for America. I certainly think everything about America is better with Trump in the office than Biden, every single thing. And I think that will be the case here. I think, all of us are human, and my rescue and my salvation doesn't lie in a little country boy state rep here from Kingston, nor does it lie in a great public servant I think that Donald Trump has become. My rescue and my salvation is from the Lord. But we do have accountabilities to him and our fellow mankind to do the right thing. And it certainly seems like President Trump's trying to do that. I am hopeful. I'm encouraged that RFK Jr. was confirmed. I think he's going to he has a great voice about these matters. And, he's been willing to take on some very powerful interests over the past years. You have to commend him in his courage for standing up to some of the pharmaceutical companies and even the health organizations. And I think that's important. I think that, not to divert from the topic too much with the answer to that question, but probably one of the ways that we have found ourselves on a slippery slope here in the United States is we have ceded some of our authority to these global organizations who have no constitutional authority over us. And I think, sometimes there's this whole, again, the globalist, secular, humanist approach to things. I think President Trump's an America First person. I think Mr. Kennedy is that. And so I'm excited. Won't try to be predictive, but I'm excited that they're going to be a big help in matters like this.
Thank you, Monty. I have another question. Will you be willing to claim this is a states' rights issue and that the federal government has no right to deprive Tennessee of sunshine? That's an interesting question to me because it brings to mind jurisdiction. Who has jurisdiction over what? If Tennessee has jurisdiction over the skies, up to what altitude does Tennessee have jurisdiction over the skies? So is this a states' rights issue that the federal government has no right to deprive Tennessee of sunshine? Can you touch on that?
I think so. I think we don't exercise our 10th Amendment to the Constitution nearly enough. I think that there are 18 enumerated powers that the federal government is given in the Constitution. And I think every time that we have allowed some authority outside those 18 areas, it has been detrimental to the republic. And I think it's absolutely important for we Tennesseans and all states, but I'm a Tennessean, to exercise our 10th Amendment authority. So lots of conversations in this topic about who's responsible for the airway. And that's why I offered you the Interstate 40 example. It's a national system of highways. And commerce certainly is an important, there's an important federal function in maintaining commerce for the nation, right? But we certainly wouldn't allow that truck carrying that hazardous chemical to enter into our state and spill it along Interstate 40 or Interstate 75 and not address it. And so I think the same thing applies here. Lots of conversation about whether it's the FAA or whom that has jurisdiction over the skies. And, I think those are big questions, but I think to the person who asked that, I think the appropriate way to address that is the state's right and responsibility of the folks who are elected officials in the states to interpose on behalf of their citizens. Because there's this whole doctrine of lesser magistrates importance, I think, with this. That while, it's not really designed that way, our founders never intended the Washington, D.C. Elected people and bureaucrats to be supreme, right? That was never the intent with the foundation of the United States. But sometimes their law is that law is macro and overarching, right? As our U.S. Constitution is. And so that's important. That's an important concept, but it is equally important for folks like myself to interpose on behalf of that grandma that lives in West Tennessee or that high school student that lives in East Tennessee that, hey, these people have not consented to this, and I've got to stand in that position between them and in the case. And I don't know, are there private entities doing some of this geoengineering? I'm sure there are. You mentioned carbon capture early. I think I mentioned it, that's something that concerns me. I think many of these are monetized scams just to fleece our dollars from us and to rob us of our liberties. I think that's the case in many of them. But I also think that it's important, and I don't want to go, I don't want to scare your audience off on this, but evil has not subsided in this world. And so I think that it's important for folks in elected office, whether it's in Canada or the United States, and I'm not trying to impose my beliefs on your nation, so I offer this respectfully. But I think it's important for elected officials, state representatives from District 32 in Tennessee, to recognize that there are evils in this world, and there are people who will commit evil acts. And, in our Declaration of Independence, we had 56 men sign on their sacred honor that they were going to separate from an evil then Great Britain. And they knew they couldn't militarily defeat the British. They knew they couldn't economically defeat the British. So they relied on faith in God to be able to accomplish that. And in that same Declaration of Independence, most of the world probably realizes and remembers those great words that say that we've been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's the next sentence that most people forget, and what is so unique, I think, about America. And it says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And so that Declaration of Independence becomes an anchor for our U.S. Constitution, which becomes an anchor, a building block for our state constitutions. And so my first responsibility, I would offer that the first responsibility for every politician in these United States, every political office holder, every public servant, and they fit into all three categories, but folks that hold office, their first responsibility, county commissioners, state reps, governors, presidents, congressmen, is to secure the rights of the people they work for. That's the number one responsibility. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at this whole geoengineering mess, and whether it's carbon capture or if some aircraft dispersing chemicals, aerosolizing chemicals at 18,000 feet or 30,000 feet, I have a duty to interpose on behalf of that citizen to secure their rights. And in this case, it's that broad and general right of perhaps even the first law of nature to just survive, And so all that, yes. The short answer is yes. That's the long answer.
Monty, before I ask my last question, I just want to say thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are grateful that you're standing up and you're speaking up in the Tennessee House of Representatives. I know not all of your statements become law, but at least your messages are on the record now. We can go online and we can see the videos of you presenting, and you're standing up for the people, and it's now on the record, even though it hasn't all become law. So there's lots that are grateful for that. Now, one of the challenges people are facing is that when they talk about this subject, so whether they're talking about geoengineering or weather modification or contrails or chemtrails or spraying, or some are actually talking about fuel, the exhaust of the airplanes, the condensation behind the airplanes causing all these clouds blocking the sun. Well, what's happening is sometimes when we share this topic with people, some of us are, the messaging is rejected on occasion. People, there's this name calling going on, conspiracy theorist. So can you give some suggestions on how to discuss this touchy subject with people who are resistant to it? How do we break through? What are some suggestions for getting through to those folks who are they're really struggling to accept that this is real?
I would say first to offer data with compassion and grace, because human beings, especially me, and I think all of us, we have a hard time conceptualizing that which we cannot readily see. There's a reason that it was only Einstein that come up with the theory of relativity, the equals mc squared. That's the reason that we had people like Marie Curie who made discoveries that other people didn't make, is because in both of those cases, those great scientists, Madame Curie and Einstein, they established something that others couldn't readily recognize. So we see the things about us, and we touch the cars that we drive, and we the aircraft that we may get, we can feel those and see those. But sometimes when we can't see things and we can't readily identify what it is, we have a hard time understanding it. And I offer people this analogy, and this is a little bit of a long-winded analogy, but I think it's worthwhile. So I'll often ask people, I'll say something along these lines. Do you realize that in at least 2 counties in Tennessee, people are, first, I'll ask them, do you understand what an atom is? That it's the base structure of all matter. And it consists of protons, neutrons, and electrons, generally, right? And I'll say, do you realize there are 2 counties in the state of Tennessee where every day we have these crazy people that are counting and managing subatomic particles. So that means something smaller than the atom. 1 times 10 to the minus 10 nanometers type size. And they're counting and measuring those and controlling those subatomic particles every day. And they're generating huge amounts of heat, so much that you can't measure it in some cases in Fahrenheit. You have to go to Celsius or centigrade to measure the heat that's capable from those reactions. And oftentimes people will look at me like, well, here's his next conspiracy theory. But the fact of the matter is that we have nuclear physicists and nuclear criticality safety engineers in our nuclear reactors that each day they measure from generation 1 to generation 2 of the neutron count to make sure that they maintain a sustained criticality and generate heat to boil water, to turn turbines, to make steam, make steam to turn turbines to make electricity. And so I offer with that, sometimes folks can't conceptualize that whole counting subatomic particles and determining the K effective of a reaction between, the number of neutrons in generation 1 versus the number of neutrons in generation 5. And the technology for this whole weather modification and cloud seeding has been around for some time. And if we were doing this quite effectively, according to reports that you see from Southeast Asia in the 60s, how has that technology advanced today? Are we able, if we were able to, the Einsteins were able to determine the theory of relativity, and that helped us to learn to capture the power harnessed within the atom, then how far have we technologically advanced with our ability to manipulate weather and modify weather? And so with compassion and with grace to that person that may offer name calling toward me, or I'm a conspiracy theorist, or a representative tinfoil hat, or any of those kinds of things, is to, again, with compassion and with grace, to just explain to them, sometimes just because you don't understand what's happening doesn't mean it's not happening.
That's a good point there. And also, just because the particle is small doesn't mean it's harmless. The particles are so small. Right. I'm hearing people call them nanoparticles, and they're so small, but that doesn't mean they're harmless. And
Yeah.
one fellow I've been looking at online talks about how when you're testing for these harmful particles, regular testing won't find them because the particles are so small. The testing has to be very specific so it'll actually pick up on these teeny tiny nanoparticles. So a question for you regarding the research, determining the funding that was behind it. When you were researching this and looking into the background of it, did you find that the funding was coming more so from the state, the federal level, or another source?
So I think it depends on which geoengineering you're referring to. Some of the testing, there was our House Energy and Water appropriations budget from 2024 had $39 million for these type efforts, federal tax dollars. If you look to some of the Western states, I think that you'll find that in some cases there's private funding of the cloud seeding because there's an advantage to snowpack and rainfall and those kinds of things. But you'll also see, I think, some state funding in some of those Western states too. I think a couple of the links I sent you, one was from the University of Texas and one from Arizona. I think those articles mentioned something about that, just for your folks that are interested. So I think it's a combination of that. I don't know. We live in an age where there are lots of really wealthy people that want to push agendas on folks, and is there some use of private funds to do this on some larger scale? I really don't know, but it's verifiable in those budget documents that you see. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the U.S. Department of Energy. I sent you, I think, a link to that. It's kind of like a flyer, and it just shows some of the things that they were exploring in like a symposium. And so, again, we're spending tax dollars to study these types of experiments, I guess. So, and I wish I could give you a direct answer on anything outside the federal budgeting, but I don't remember what the state budget dollars were for those Western states. And I don't have anything evidentiary to say this person or that person.
Thank you. So going forward, you did mention Bill 1112. Can you talk more about what you figure needs to happen going forward? I suspect you're not just going to stop at Bill 1112, and you're also not going to stop at working to make a difference at the state level. I suspect you'd like to make a difference bigger than that. Can you talk a little bit about your visions going forward?
Sure. And I think there's some challenges with the vision going forward, because the atmosphere that's over Tennessee today was the atmosphere over Texas or Arizona yesterday, right? Or 2 days ago. And so it's even a little bit different than taking a grab sample from a stream to determine the contaminants in the water. Because the atmosphere, and at different levels, the atmosphere is moving at different rates of speed. And so there's a difficulty in establishing that baseline. You know, if it were just a pure data thing and everything was static, it would be easy to take a 5,000 foot sample and a 50,000 foot sample and over positions A, B, and C and draw the line through it and determine, you know, whether you had an increase or decrease in any of these contaminants. But it's a little more complex with that, with the atmosphere. I think that some of the things that we're seeing are probably going to require additional samples of our water, our streams, our soils, because one can only presume that if we are indeed depositing chemicals into the atmosphere, that it's coming down on us. So, you know, there's the whole push in the United States. I'm a fan of coal. I think that coal is a great energy source. We've learned how to do that in a much more clean manner than what we did, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But some of the things that we see in our atmosphere today that are problematic for us from a pollutant perspective and from legitimate industries come from the fact that China's building 2 new coal plants per week right now because they understand that the kilowatt is the critical production unit for an economy. And that same thing's going to apply with the geoengineering. If we have other nations that are indeed geoengineering, whether that weather modification is simply to get more rainfall in Dubai or to get more snowpack in Idaho, the efforts in those areas are going to result at some point in elevated levels of something, whatever that chemical is, whether it's silver or lead or arsenic or whatever we may be using in other places. And so I'm not sure that we are equipped at this point in time. I want to do something along those lines, perhaps next, in additional sampling and establishing a baseline and some monitoring for this, because I think that would be helpful for the people's general health. But there's a huge cost to that. And so we're a very fiscally responsible state, and getting dollars applied to that sometimes is a difficult thing. I don't expect that there's going to be a fiscal note with the current Bill 1112, because I think it lies within the boundaries of the authorization that are already in place for those with prosecutorial authorities. But we'll see. I should have a fiscal note back on it soon, and that becomes a little bit of a challenge. I think the other thing I would offer is just a willingness to discuss the matter, and for folks like yourself, not just in my state or in my nation, but around the world, to say, you know what, we're not okay with this. I think we probably, not to sound hyperbolic about this, but I think because of some of the things we saw that were so egregiously evil that took place in both our countries a few years ago, I think there's a heightened awareness, and I think there's a lessened tolerance of some of that. And I talked about just the awareness of evil. No one wants to admit that there is such evil that it produces a Pol Pot or a Adolf Hitler. But that didn't go away in the 40s, nor the 50s, nor the 60s. And I think there has to be an awareness that some human beings will just do egregiously, horribly evil things to one another. And I think, and unless you come to that recognition, you have a hard time having conversations about things like geoengineering, my opinion.
Monty, thank you so much for your presentation today. I really appreciate your good work. I hope you keep it up. I'm looking forward to what happens in the future. If people would like to reach out to you to offer, thanks, because I've had a few people say thanks, or perhaps they'd like to offer suggestions, what's the best way to reach you? Is it email, or what's the best way?
My email, and I can put it up on the chat there if you would like me to, but you can go to capital.tn.gov, capital with an O.tn.gov, and just search for me. And it's got a little link. You want to have to type it in, just hit the envelope and you can send an email, and we'll certainly get that. I get lots of emails, and that I appreciate, the ones that are encouraging and the ones that, sometimes aren't so encouraging. I appreciate those as well. The most important thing you can do if you're an American is make sure that your state rep, your county commissioner, your city councilman, your mayor, your governor, and your congressmen and senators understand how you feel about this issue. And as you started off earlier, I thought you just did such a great job with your presentation. Be professional, be polite, be assertive and direct, but and try to open those emails with what your objective is in the first couple sentences, because many of these folks, at least in my role, we get thousands of emails, and it's important if you can kind of do the bottom line up front, if you will, of what your interest is and what your ask or request or demand is, and send as many of those as you possibly can. It does matter. It matters in Tennessee. Most of the time, we take on things, if it's not an absolute constitutional directive or protection that is not an opinion thing. In our nation, we're supposed to look at that Constitution first. And if it is clearly constitutional, we don't live in the democracy that many of my colleagues sometimes think we live in. We live in a constitutional republic. And so if it's a constitutional matter, a First Amendment matter, a Second Amendment matter, how government's supposed to function, the roles of the executive or legislative department, those are constitutional matters. But if it's something that is in preference or a consideration, we ought to be listening to what the people want us to do. And so I think the advice you gave your friends here on the line is very good.
Thank you very much, Monty. Thanks for being a presenter. I hope we can engage with you again at a later date. We're going to move on now to our other presenters. We're going to hear shortly from MellowKat in California. We'll be hearing from Jim Lee in South Carolina. We also have Lloyd from BC who will be speaking today. Thank you so much, Monty. Any final thoughts, Monty?
No, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to join y'all.
Thank you. Our next presenter, ladies and gentlemen, made it somewhat famous online on Substack. She goes by MellowKat on Substack, and she did a video where she was very, very concerned about what she was seeing happening in the skies. And she's been studying this for years and years, doing her research, doing testing, doing samples, so much work. And one day she got motivated and decided, you know what, I'm fed up. And she went to the airport, confronted the pilot. So the video and audio of that went online, and lots of people viewed it. And so MellowKat, welcome. And Kathryn, I'm so happy to have you here. And I really have to say, I admire your boldness. I'm not saying everybody should be rushing to the airport, but there certainly are times when we need to speak up to the people who are doing things that hurt us. And so, MellowKat, thanks for being here. Please share your story.
Thank you so much for having me. And I loved listening to the last half of Monty's presentation. I am thrilled to see this awareness and this movement becoming, as he said, it's less uncomfortable to start to talk about this. I think people have been observing the skies, and more of us are speaking up, and they're starting to listen, and it becomes undeniable when you're watching all these wild weather events that something appears to be happening on a global scale. So for about 10 years, I've been watching the skies. Like most people, you are working a 9-to-5 job. You're going, from the house to the car to your place of business, and you don't get to observe the skies throughout the period of a day. And it was when I first had my son that suddenly I had time to watch all of the grid patterns in the skies spread out and take away the sun by about 3 or 4 p.m. when most people are starting to get out of work. And I had never at the time heard of geoengineering or chemtrails. And so I stumbled into the word chemtrails when I brought it up to a cashier at a local grocery store. I said, do you notice this? I'm noticing this. It's bothering me. And she said, yeah, those are chemtrails. So that was the beginning of this journey. And I then found Dane Wigington's website, of course, and he sort of validated the things I was seeing. And of course, 10 or so years ago, you couldn't talk about this on social media without getting completely lambasted, ostracized, made fun of. So I dropped it, but I continued to watch. Then in 2020, as most of you are aware, that was a real wake-up call for many of us when we realized that the coordinated lies and the deception and the public-private partnerships that were benefiting from the fear porn that they were foisting on everyone, and the fact that they had no regard for our bodily autonomy, and they were trying to help us, guide us into these medical decisions with threat of losing your job if you refuse to comply. So in 2020, I became very outspoken. I was fighting for my child and his right not to wear a mask, get tested, or get the inevitable, what I like to call the bioweapon injection. And so I was very proactive in that fight. I was also, because I was so proactive and I was hosting rallies and protests and I was very outspoken, I decided also to check Flight Radar to figure out if there was maybe, because I heard about FBI companies, hiring or starting shell companies to then surveil the population with their aircraft. So that's one of the reasons I jumped on. But then also it was natural for me to want to then figure out who was leaving the trails. Though at that time, I was so proactive in fighting the medical tyranny that I was also told, don't talk about chemtrails because you'll lose your audience, you'll lose credibility. So it wasn't until about 2.5 years ago, I finally relocated from a very, very strict, they were very, convid crazy, you mask up, you stand on your dots, you follow the arrows. And I had many standoffs with local deputies, because I refused to wear a mask. So we relocated to the mountains in California, which I'm so grateful for. And I was learning a lot at this time. I learned about things like 9/11. I started learning about all of the lies we've been told throughout history. And so I was thrilled to be able to finally start a garden. So I then went back to, now I'm going to grow my own food. I became very aware of, they want to put mRNA vaccines in our food. They bioengineer everything. I knew our water was bad, but I didn't really know how bad it was. But it was while I was outside building my garden space that I saw, yet again, my sky is getting absolutely whited out. And that was when I decided that I was done being quiet about it, and it was time to normalize the conversation. And so I decided to start a Telegram channel, because at the time I was off of social media. I was just Telegram Signal. And I started a group called California Chemtrails, which was just mostly because it sounds catchy. And I didn't really have a goal or a plan for the group other than to get Californians to start watching the skies with me, documenting and looking for patterns. And then slowly, bit by bit, I decided I would follow in the footsteps of those before me. And as you know, rain samples had been taken in various counties. And I thought, well, I'd like to know what's in my rain. So then began the process of investigating, how do I take samples? Where do I submit my rain? Very lengthy process. My samples came back with heavy metals. And then I had to find out, what do these numbers mean? Why is there aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, magnesium, zinc, and copper in my rain? And I took more samples, same questions. So I started to try to research what the inhalation and ingestion limits were. And finally, I realized there has to be an agency that knows. So then I started inquiring with the local air pollution control district and the California Air and Resources Board. Sorry, for some reason I'm nervous. I've had so many interviews and I'm fried on my computer screen. I need to catch my breath.
You're doing great, MellowKat. Kathryn, do you prefer that? I love your screen name. Just a note to everybody that you can find her information on Substack. And recently, actually, she did a video about a tool I think we should all become familiar with. It's called flightradar24.com. And basically, the idea of the tool is when you see an aircraft above you, and let's say you can't see the tail letters of the aircraft, maybe it's too far away, Flight Radar 24, if the aircraft has the right transponder, what'll happen is when you go to that website, you can figure out what aircraft that is. Is it Air Canada? What is it, right? And what kind of aircraft is it? Now, it won't always tell you, but it'll sometimes tell you, which can be part of this journey we're on. Kathryn's been sharing that we need to do some tracking. We need to keep some records, and we need to take those records and we need to report them somewhere. I have this concept of creating a kind of a North American reporting system. So if you see something in the sky you're concerned about, you can report it to this North American reporting system. Now, it might not be everything you report is concerning, because some of it might not be that concerning. I am concerned, though, about white trails. They appear harmless. When there's too many of them, I lose my sunshine. So I am concerned, even if it's merely water in those trails. I'm concerned. So that's a concept we're working on. So anyways, Kathryn has more to present. Go ahead, Kathryn.
Well, and some of the things I found when looking at flight radar is when you start to investigate what's happening right over your head, you're going to find a plethora of things. I discovered insect drops when I researched the companies that owned these registered planes or that managed these flights. I started noticing patterns. We had come to find out we had a 30-year-old plus cloud seeding project that was happening over my head out here in the mountains for 30 years. They kept renewing it every 4 years or so based on an outdated environmental impact report, which only looked at silver. So after much research, I then started to question, well, what are in the flares? Maybe that will answer why I'm getting these metals in my rain. And I found out that the flares do indeed have more than just silver iodide. They include ammonium perchlorate, zinc powder, aluminum powder, copper iodide, and ammonium iodide. And so now the interesting part about my samples was that I had titanium. So I did some more research and discovered that titanium dioxide nanoparticles are used in the United Arab Emirates and that experiments were being done in the United States. So there's a lot of documentation and evidence out there when you search for the right keywords. But I started then investigating and trying to find out, do my local representatives know about this? Who knows what is safe to breathe and to drink? And what I found out was that my air pollution control district was oblivious. The California Air and Resources Board, they didn't know what I was talking about, and they don't test for most of these metals because they only test for these things if they know of an emission of concern. And so that is when I began the written documentation process of, my rain samples are a signal. And here is a contract for the weather modification operation that's been happening for decades. This is an emission of concern at this point. And when are you going to do your job and start doing the tests on our soil and our water? Because at that time, I was testing myself. And then I finally recruited some support from Save Our Skies, Raynette, a couple of friends helped donate for a few samples, but I have over 20 samples. And so I was working really hard on documenting who knows what and what their incompetencies really were. And so, yeah, but what I will say is flight radar has been an incredible tool for me because, even recently I identified a Canadian aircraft that belonged to a Canadian company. Now, this was not, his transponder was off, but he flew right over my house. So I captured the tail number with my camera and come to find out they're surveying California for minerals that will help us achieve our climate goals. Now, you can take that for what it is. Monty touched on the carbon capture scam. There are all sorts of ways they're looking to make a profit. And you'll find that these transnational companies and big oil, gas, they're behind a lot of this carbon capture scam. It's sort of like they've created a new market out of thin air. And there's so many things I have been investigating over the years. And you'll see that all on my BitChute channel and on Substack. And I took some samples of spider silk that was falling from the sky, that was falling across Europe, that was falling, and we've been investigating, what is this? Is it really spider silk? It doesn't appear to be. So, the cloud seeding and the solar radiation management are only just a part of the ways that we're being assaulted, in my opinion. By the way, this was not my first pilot confrontation. I had discovered that under the guise of protecting public health, they were spraying everybody with adulticides, which are organophosphate pesticides. And they were under the guise of, we're protecting you, we're going to kill mosquitoes that pose a risk to your health. Well, the ingredients they were spraying, dibrome, with the active ingredient NALED or NALED, is highly toxic to our bees, butterflies, birds, aquatic life, and even people. So again, these are the things you discover when you're on flight radar. And then you can identify where the planes take off and their patterns, and then where they land. And so that was the time I used the opportunity to track down the cloud seeder over my house and confront him. And you can find that all over the internet now, which is just wild.
Actually, you inspired me. And so I got on flightradar24.com, and I live in Alberta, and our air traffic, it was nighttime when I was on there. Our air traffic here isn't as busy as in some areas, but it was just so interesting to go on the website and look at what's happening in Alberta right now in the middle of the night, and to see what certain planes were doing. And one plane was kind of going back and forth, loopy loop, and I managed to click on it, and I learned a bit about that airplane, and I'm like, wonder what that plane's up to. I may very well reach out to that corporation and ask, just because the traffic didn't make sense to me. So if we are just paying attention and we are engaged, we can notice these concerns and issues, and we can do something about it. Yeah. Too many people, though, I'm finding are disengaged. They're watching the videos on their phones or playing the games on their computers, and they're just living their lives, and they're not even looking up in the air to see the concerns that are happening.
And it's by design. And I think that's what I really hope for out of all of this is that, and I've had experiences in the past. I mean, they were prepared to release genetically engineered mosquitoes in California, and that's another thing I fought to prevent. And I went directly to the general manager of the mosquito vector control district that was proposing to partner with this biotech company out of the UK called Oxitec. And I called him out and I said, you're responsible for this if you participate in this pilot release. And here are the concerns I have. And I went over some of the things I discovered about previous releases done in India and Brazil. And they do not like being held accountable. But I'll tell you something, that public pressure is what you can apply immediately. You don't have to wait for a politician or a lawsuit or a celebrity to do anything for you. You can find out, when people talk about organizations or businesses, figure out who the CEOs are, who are the decision makers of those businesses. And the beauty about, the contract that I found on the NOAA library, by the way, there's a non-federal weather modification library. So this is not for the the military or the federal projects. This is for the smaller cloud seeding, snowpack augmentation projects. That's one place you can start to look into to find evidence that this is actually happening all over. This has been happening in California since at least the 50s, maybe before, some would say. They used to spray titanium tetrachloride on people, which is hugely toxic. So this is nothing new. I just think that people have not been really aware of the cumulative impact of these metals. I mean, again, they haven't done any tests or samples out here to determine, how much has it built up in your soil. All they look at is silver iodide. But as I found in the flares and the ingredients of the flares, there's much more than that. And so it's been an ongoing process, but we have to start going to the local players who are involved and the ones that are taking the money from the grants or the California Energy Commission or from taxpayer special taxes. And we have to then expose it and expose who the players are and then make it easy for people by giving contact emails and numbers and names. That's what I've been trying to do. I would encourage everybody to go to my Substack. I started that after BitChute for about 5 years. I have a lot of videos on BitChute where I kind of document all the passions that I've had, carbon capture scams, mosquitoes, spider surveillance. I
just want to interject, Kathryn. One of the things I love about you is your manner. And so although you're upset, and rightfully so, and although you're armed with facts, the way you approach that pilot, when I watched your video, and I think you know which one I'm referring to, you managed to get in there, you managed to talk to him, but you were professional. You were assertive, but professional. You were matter of fact. You didn't get emotional. You didn't get angry. You were very matter of fact. The pilot attempted to sidestep away from responsibility and say, oh, well, it's my job. If you have a concern about it, take it up with the owner of, or the manager. And then you said, I've been attempting to reach out to him and he's not responding. So here I am talking to you because apparently nobody's listening, right? And so
right.
I love your manner. Everybody should watch that video. And I'm not saying I want everybody to go to airports and talk to pilots.
I am.
Not what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is when we're upset about something, if we can all learn from Kathryn and her style of presenting, if we could all present in that style, I think we'd be more effective.
And I would say a lot of people here might realize, I hate being stonewalled. I've been stonewalled for years. They want to pass the buck to somebody else. And you get on these horrible automated phone calls. You leave messages all the time and nobody takes you seriously. I think it was a combination of just years of I was impatient. I've been waiting for maybe some legislation to happen or possibly a lawsuit to come together. And I just hit my limit because when you hear the aircraft over your house, it makes your stomach turn because you know that I have chickens, I have my child, I have my soil, and I'm working so hard to have as healthy of a life as I can. And by the way, I have vented. I'm going to apologize in advance. Some of my videos on BitChute, I let it rip because I have to have a way to release steam. So there are times I use very choice words. But now when it comes to engaging with my representatives, when I talk to my county supervisors, or my city council, or anyone that has the capacity to maybe make an impact or change their behaviors, I try to be calm and matter of fact because I want to reach them. I know if I would have went in there shaking my fist and calling them bad names, that it wouldn't have gone anywhere. I needed to make sure, number one, I don't know who these pilots are. I don't know how much they know about what they're doing. I think a lot of them just kind of, it's a job and they think it's, benevolent or benign, or, the adulticide pilot felt he was educated by the chemical corporation that paid for him to do the job. And he was like, this is perfectly safe. Though he admitted to me that these organophosphate pesticides were used as nerve agents in World War I. So he wasn't entirely clueless, that these are not good for the environment or our health. So for me, that's my first step, is coming face to face with him. I think it was very surprising for him. It was probably 1:30 in the morning to have a woman get into the airport. It was all locked. And I was very friendly at the door. I knew my tail number. I knew he was landing. I don't think they expected that a regular person from the outside would know all of this stuff. So they said, sure, come on in. And I waited for him. And that is when I hit record on my audio, because I also have learned to document, as when you're interacting with these folks, for my own notes, my own recollection, because sometimes you lose your train of thought. You get a little nervous, right? And I wanted to make sure I remembered everything that I said. And I'm so grateful that I didn't get upset, because I think it was much more impactful considering how much this post has gone viral. So I'm hoping to encourage people just to start getting familiar with reading the skies, because now I have people bombarding my phone. It's fantastic. I'm happy to help everybody. They are saying, look at this plane, look at this plane. And it's wonderful, because I can say, I recognize that tail number, or, oh, that kind of pattern looks like they're doing surveying, or this one looks like a cloud seeding pattern. And so the more that people can become familiar with flight patterns and identifying the aircraft through the registration website. And again, it's all in my tutorial. It's my first Zoom tutorial. I cover quite a bit in about 30, 40 minutes or so. Please watch that. And I'm always available for more meetings. In fact, I've had requests to talk about how I read the NOAA library. I've had requests on, what did you do for your Public Records Act requests? And that will be coming up. I post most of my work now on Substack. So please, it's MellowKat at, Substack MellowKat. And stay in touch with me there, because it feels so, it's like a load is going off my shoulders, knowing that people are actually interested for the first time. So many people were interested. I mean, we have our groups, right? 40, 50 people, maybe 100 people. To see how many people responded so positively was very hopeful for me. I actually feel really good about where things are going at this point.
Can you talk a bit about taking samples?
Yeah.
I assume there's a special method to rainwater samples. You must start with a perfectly clean container, and then you have to take the sample in a manner that you don't contaminate it. So I don't know if you're doing a scoop or you're pouring it, but everything has to be perfectly clean. And maybe you need samples from like a 7-day stretch or something, like guidelines on samples, and then also guidelines on getting those tested. Perhaps you could name the testing.
I will. Yes. So I was referred to McCampbell Analytical Inc., which is a lab out of California. And I'm going to recommend to everybody, it really depends on what you're testing for. If you're testing for plastics, you probably don't collect in plastic containers. I was collecting and wanted to test for the heavy metals that other people like Dane had tested for. So I was inspired by that. Then she walked me through all of the metals I could test for. So the first few samples were around $224, because I was doing the CAM 17, which is like a list of 17 metals. And then I had to add aluminum. I had to add several other metals that I was curious about. And then after getting several samples for this price, I realized there were certain metals that just weren't routinely showing up. So I then cut those out, and I got my price down to probably $170 or so per sample. And what they told me, and your lab will tell you how to collect. It depends on what you're testing for. So because I was testing for heavy metals, I was instructed to put out clean plastic containers. So you can clean the plastic containers by doing a hot wash in the dishwasher, or just washing it out with soap and water and then drying it really well. And then I set them outside. I have a very open driveway, concrete, and I just waited for the rain to fall. And I caught and also they'll tell you how much they would like you to send in. So I learned that this lab required 50 milliliters of the rain sample. Now they tested it as wastewater, because there wasn't a category for rain. It wasn't tap water. And I'm not really sure about the differences in how, what they do for testing, but But regardless, I got the sample results back, and the metals, were all there. And you'll see them fluctuating too. I took some samples, at the start of the rainfall and then maybe an hour later. And I did find a significant drop off for the metals that I found in the first part of the rainfall. I'd also recommend you spread out your sample collectors, because you want more surface space to catch the rain when it's falling. And you could put them out for 10 minutes, depending on how long it rains, and you'll have enough to have, 50 milliliters is roughly a quarter cup if you're in the US. But so that's how I did it. And then what they would do is the lab ended up sending me sample containers that I could transfer the sample into. I originally sent in, clean containers with a lid. And I was doing that in the beginning, and then finally they said, "Well, we can send you some containers to put it in." So that worked. And so you learn as you speak to your lab. It's been such it was a bit of a slog in the beginning trying to figure it all out, but then it becomes like second nature, right? And so also I'd recommend that you timestamp with photos and video. So hold
on. I just want to clarify something. Yeah. We're going to get to the timestamp, photos, and video. You had mentioned a company you used in California. You got results. Was that McCampbell Analytical Incorporated in Pittsburgh, California?
Ooh, it could be. I believe so. If it's McCampbell Analytical Inc., I believe so. I know I had to ship it to them. So I could do a quick search. I believe McCampbell Analytical Inc. probably is in Pittsburgh, but it's not ringing familiar for me. Hold on.
Okay, because I just
they are in Pittsburgh. Yes, I have what here. Yep, they're on 1534 Willow Pass Road, Pittsburgh, California.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. People are looking for examples, right? Like, yes. We're not all going to use that company, but at least it's a company you got results with. Perhaps someone else might use that company. So, sorry, keep going.
At the very least, look into the company and see the sorts of metals that they do test for. And then when you're searching for companies closer to your home, you can sort of compare, what does this company offer versus that one? And that might just help educate you a little bit as well. What else? So, what was the other question? I think, I caught the sample. That was what I did for my samples. And then I also sent the samples in with a chain of custody form to verify that this is when the sample left my house. I signed for it at UPS, shipped the sample, they received it. And then I asked them in the beginning to save my samples for 2 years. Well, now the 2 years have passed, but there's plenty of opportunities to take samples, because it's clear that the geoengineering continues to happen. The weather, the cloud seeding continues to happen. So, that's where I am. But what I've been, also at least in the United States, in California, I'll speak for California, we have 35 air districts where they require, based on, CARB, the California Air and Resources Board, requires each district to have a hearing board. And the hearing board is comprised of a medical professional, an engineer, a lawyer, and then 2 members of the public. So I have applied actually in January to be on the hearing board for my air district, because apparently our particular district has not had a hearing board for at least 5 years. So again, when you want to talk about them dropping the ball, they haven't even been focused on cloud seeding because nobody has been making that big of a stink about it. That's my assumption. Okay. But I started hitting the hammer, talking to, why don't you have the answers? If you don't have the answers, who can you talk to above you that can find the answers? If you don't have them, find them, because you represent me. I don't know why these people are getting paid. All they're worried about is becoming carbon neutral by 2030. It's a joke. So we have to apply pressure. Another thing that I found really helpful was to get them to respond. I would CC my board of supervisors on the emails to the Pollution Control District and to the California Air and Resources Board, because I wanted them all to see whether or not, the pressure was on to respond, because again, you have like the delay in the reply, and then you have to follow up and say, I haven't heard back yet. I'm following up to see when you're going to get back to me. And then they'll give you something, they'll respond with like a link, like, oh, here you go, here's a link. And you realize the link didn't answer all your questions. And then you have to, read a couple hundred pages and then go back to them and say, well, actually you didn't, thank you for this, but I need now this and this and this. So it is a little laborious, but then you have that written documentation of what they know, didn't know, and that will be helpful down the road for perhaps an environmental attorney to say, oh, they dropped the ball here because, by the way, one of the, I forget the time, it's like a California water code or a weather modification, something in California says that the weather modification company needs to notify the Board of Supervisors for where these projects are taking place. And I have evidence because of written correspondence from my own Board of Supervisor that she had never been notified. None of our supervisors were aware that this project had been happening right over our county to benefit the irrigation, Turlock and Modesto Irrigation District, again, water and power to the west of us, right? It's a pretty big operation, actually. I think the CEO of Modesto Irrigation District makes over $800,000 a year. So, they're supplying power and water to people. And I think they have some sort of something happening with the dams out here. So now my concern is that, with the particulate you put into the atmosphere, you can induce drought, right? You can prevent precipitation or you can then make the rain fall where you want it to fall, which is diverting water to your area. Now in California, as you know, we have water rights that are precious, right? PG&E owns a lot of our water rights. You've got the Resnick family who owns Palm Wonderful that have a lot of water rights. You've got Saudi Arabia owns some water rights. So if there are wealthy individuals that have the means to divert water to their land so they have, they can collect it and use it as they wish and sell it to people, water wars, right? It's unfair. So it's unfair. It's contaminating our environment. They're calling it benign, like, oh, it's so wonderful, we're making it rain. It's just silver iodide. It's no big deal. But actually, no, it's not. There's much more to it. So
wow, you are just a wealth of information. I can listen to you all day, but I'm representatives too. So we're not going to have time for questions.
I tell this story so much. I've been on a lot of podcast interviews. I'm so fried by looking at my phone. Like for weeks on end now, I'm like, oh God. And I'm like, am I repeating myself like somebody with dementia? Oh, and by the way, speaking of dementia, in 2020, Blue Cross and Blue Shield said that there was a rise of early onset dementia and Alzheimer's in age 30 and 40-year-olds. And I went, well, what a coinky dink, right? I mean, part of it is because of the injectables, because they all have aluminum in them now. But then also, we're breathing it, we're drinking it. Shocker, So those are some of the harms that I would think you could claim that they've caused. And and then they also are CRISPR engineering seeds to be aluminum resistant, right? Because aluminum suffocates plants. So guess who's going to make the money there? Your Monsantos, your Bayers, your Bill Gateses, who have everyone who's invested in that technology. Even what I've learned, something I've explored, is the CRISPR engineering of seeds to replant after forest fire, and they're called fire plugs. Fire plug seed is the brand. And this company called Mast Restoration is like, we'll replant your forest and your land for free as long as you don't build on it, right? So, I mean, if you are awake to what's happening, like they're driving people out with fires and flooding, and they're dropping their CRISPR engineered replacements after they kill off the bees and the bugs and the butterflies. They'll give us their CRISPR replacements, right? That's where I see this going. So again, frustrated, I decided to go right to the person that was dumping the metals over my house, and I will continue to do that. I also, on my Substack, shared the interaction with the adulticide spraying pilot, and also my interaction with the general manager who wanted to release the mosquitoes. And by the way, there was some success there. I put his name and his face and his number everywhere. And I had friends helping me contact every environmental organization to say, were you aware that they're going to release these mosquitoes in California? And we had an opportunity to leave public comment for the California Department of Pesticide Regulation and to say, hell no. So guess what? Over 5,400 emails of opposition came in, and you know what happened? They had to quietly withdraw their research application, and they went away. Now, what I'm seeing, that was a win, but now they're not going to give up because Oxitec, which is the company that genetically modifies insects, worms, moths, they have a plan to expand throughout the United States because they know that we're going to need their interventions, right? Because they're killing everything as we know it. So keep your eyes out for that. They'll call it sustainable pest management. What they really mean is we're going to release some genetically modified pests to create more problems, and then we'll offer you our diagnostic tests and our fake solutions. And that's where this is going, if I may say.
Can I book you for March 25th? It'll be another addressing a geoengineering meeting with more so of a focus on carbon capture. You have so much to share. We can't get through it all today.
I know. No. I would love that because there's a whole other story to the carbon capture, and I will fill that slot.
Well, thank you. I wish we could do more, but I got to get to my next presenter.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks for having me, Benita, and for also letting me take a breath for a moment, too. It's been a whirlwind. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We will be in touch, and we'll book you for March 25th. Thank you, Kathryn. Wow, my head is spinning now. I'm learning so much so fast, and I'm sure the rest are too. And I know we could listen to her for another hour, but I did book other presenters, so we got to get to those other presenters. So the next presenter is in South Carolina. And lots of people know him as Jim Lee. Some people know him as James Lee. And he has multiple websites. And he'll be sharing with us some of his material. He hasn't merely just been studying this material. He's been taking action on it and inspiring others to take action on it and make a difference. And so, Jim, I'm just so happy you could be here today. You're such a welcome guest, and you've inspired me, by the way, in the times that we've been chatting on the phone. I'm always learning from you. So I'm just really, really grateful you could be here as a guest here today, and I welcome your message.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and good job, Kat. Kat and I have been friends for quite a while now. Monty, excellent presentation. I love the injection of God should control the weather, not man. I don't trust man with my taxes. I don't trust man with my government. Why the heck would I trust them with my climate, my weather? And you shouldn't either. So that's really where I start with this. It's pretty simple. If they haven't been able to prove that cloud seeding has any efficacy or it has any provable results in 79 years since it was invented, no phone, I'm on Zoom, you're going on Do Not Disturb. Then why would we allow them to continue to make millions of dollars and exploit our weather for milking the skies for these water wars that are currently going on? So what I want to do real quick is I'm going to share some stuff with you guys. And I have 3 screens up here. Let me move some of this around real quick. Apparently I full screen the Zoom, get you over here, bring you over here, and away we go. I'm going to share this screen now, and we're going to jump into this. Feet first. Buckle up, Buttercup. All right. I hope you guys can see that. So this first thing is, I like to make different ways for people to learn things. Because I believe that, not everybody wants to read lengthy articles. Some people want to, watch videos. Some people listen to podcasts. I like to try to give people as many options as possible. So this is an article I wrote in 2017, and I made an infographic to go with it called 10 Technologies to Own the Weather Today. And as you can see here, this pretty much summarizes all of the weather modification and geoengineering technologies in one slide. Are you able to see this, Benita? Good. All right. So we have 3 major categories of weather control technologies, and that is weather modification, geoengineering, and space weather modification. Space weather, what is that? Well, that is things like what's going on in the ionosphere. That has to do with solar winds. That is what HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, is involved in. Firing sounding rockets from Poker Flat Research Range in Alaska to shoot trimethyl aluminum, barium, strontium, lithium, many different chemicals that are tracers, and then heating them with 3.6 million watt microwaves to create artificial plasma mirrors and use our sky as a open air laboratory. Alternatively, and that's 1 and 2. We also have satellites like the CRES satellite, which was the combined release and rocket experimental satellite, which they could literally press a button from launch control and dump a bunch of strontium, cesium-137, and other chemicals. These chemicals are used because they adhere to magnetic field lines. They are paramagnetic in many cases, so they actually stick to the magnetic field lines of the upper ionosphere and the Van Allen belts and allow them to then modify space weather. Below that, we have lasers. Lasers can be used to excite rainfall because they make ionizing channels, but lasers are also used as laser lightning rods in order to steer lightning away from critical infrastructure. Cloud seeding has been around since 1946. There are many different forms of cloud seeding. There isn't just the chemical cloud seeding that you're familiar with. There is also cloud ionization techniques where they release negatively charged ions. That's number 6 down here. It's a coronal electrical ejection. Basically, instead of using chemicals as cloud condensation nuclei or cloud seeds, they use negatively charged ions to attract pollution particles together. Then we're going to talk about geoengineering. And I really want to focus on this one for a second because I don't think people really understand what's going on here. The purpose of this graphic is not only to show you the technologies, but where they occur. Typically, flights are right here between the troposphere and the stratosphere. Now, they may ride over that line into the stratosphere, but they're in the lower stratosphere. David Keith, Ken Caldeira, and every geoengineer who ever signed a paper and had it peer reviewed, they were never talking about geoengineering at 40,000 feet. Their goal is 70 to 90,000 feet or 22 to 25 kilometers. The reason why is because geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injection at 70 to 90,000 feet at the equator will make its way to the poles and block sunlight worldwide and will live in the stratosphere for 2 to 4 years before it needs to be replenished. Whereas what we see planes doing, whenever plane exhaust particulates end up in the stratosphere, whether it's sulfur dioxide, sulfuric acid, or any of the nanoparticles of metal, they do geoengineer, but it's much more temporarily. It has much less of an effect. So there's a big difference between the geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injection that Bill Gates is paying for to study, that the United Nations Environmental Assembly is trying to cover geoengineering governance laws so that they can legalize this on a worldwide basis. And I think that that matters. Alternatively, we have ship tracks, contrail-induced cirrus, and water vapor pollution because most people don't even realize things like nuclear power creates clouds through water vapor pollution. International shipping makes ship tracks, and planes make contrail-induced cirrus. All of these may be water vapor pollution and considered accidental geoengineering by scientists and legislators alike, but nonetheless, this is not just weather modification because you had a bright sunshiny day that became a partly cloudy day that became a overcast day. That is the definition of weather modification. It is also geoengineering. We could dive deeply into that, but I got too much to cover. So I created an entire website for people to have a resource just for this, aside from my home base at climateviewer.com, weathermodificationhistory.com. Is it man-made or is it nature? This is really the fundamental question that a lot of people are trying to answer for themselves, for people they're talking to. So in order to better educate yourself on that, you can come through and look at my interactive timeline. It goes all the way back to 1850 to present. There's over 180 different articles in there. If you want a brief look at how it works like this. You pick the category, and these are all the different stories, and every single one of these has a different, has all the MLA references, all of the pictures, videos. There's your laser lightning rod, just for anybody who was thinking I was absolutely crazy. Scroll down to the bottom. There is them, attempting to steer a lightning bolt with a laser. That is them actually steering a lightning bolt with a laser funded by DARPA. And that is Terra Mobile, the terawatt femtosecond laser. So what I'll do with each of these is give you all of the MLA references, which you can see here. Project Nimbus from DARPA, links to it so that you can get all the information on it. And this is just a single timeline entry out of the 180 there. We also have a newspaper vault, which if you come here, there are over 800 newspapers created by a Canadian of all people, my best friend, Dominic Marama. We've been partners since 2015. And in here, you can literally sort through newspaper articles from 1889. Well, this is 1880 all the way to present, and you can just flip through them very quick. Producing Rain, 1891, and flip through them. I'm telling you, I've read all of these. I have a photographic memory. It will take you approximately a year if you're a speed reader to go through all of the material just on this page alone. So if you want to truly know the history of weather modification, rainmaking, and everything through weather warfare, this is your spot, including Tesla's tidal wave machine. Great stuff, absolutely huge images, all free and open source. You can download it yourself. And finally on here, there are frequently asked question pages. The new favorite that everybody's really enjoying is my patent volume. I recently updated this. It was less than 2 months ago. 1,181 patents. It's all of the patents for weather modification and geoengineering worldwide. Type in hurricane, and guess what? It'll search through the entire database and only give you hurricane modification patents. You can literally click on any one of those, and it'll show you diagrams, links to the original, all of that sort of thing. Very fun stuff, very educational. I hope you jump into that. Now, we were talking about weather modification and chemical and electrical weather modification. These are cloud ionizers. These are cloud seeding flares. I'm only showing you this right now because ground-based cloud seeding generators, it may be something you've never heard of. These are the flare racks that are on the plane, similar to the one that Weather Modification Incorporated was flying. The pilots that MellowKat was just speaking about, they were flying this plane right here, one identical to it that had a flare rack on it. So these are cloud seeding flares, just to give you a picture to go with the discussion here. And every one of my frequently asked question pages has two versions. One's for the nerds, and I also have one called like Weather Control for Dummies. So you can either take the short version where I get real technical or go into the long version. It comes with a PowerPoint presentation that you can download for yourself and all of the information on the different technologies. You just expand them like this and then read about them. Does cloud seeding work? No. And here's all the reasons why. So I also mapped out all of the programs. This is a 3D globe that I created. It's WebGL. It's on Climate Viewer 3D. I did pass all the links to Benita, so she should maybe share that to you guys. But when Mr. Fritz was speaking earlier about who does these projects and being able to know for a fact who it is, I have all that information right here, and it'll literally tell you these are the people who are modifying the weather and what they did. Objective, increased snowpack, Northern Utah, West Unitas, 1989, state, ground-based cloud seeding generators, where they did it, why they did it, and all of that. And these are ground-based cloud seeding generators, all the fire icons. Most people have no idea how large the weather modification systems out in the West are. This is Idaho Power Company, just Idaho Power Company. You can see right here on the sidebar that Idaho Power Company, one sec, I'll blow it up real big. That's maybe too big. Idaho Power's cloud seeding projects, and you can see that these are owned and operated by Idaho Power, and they look like this. Very tall, big propane tank, silver iodide generator on here, solar panels so that it can be remote, put on a mountain, flare head up here. This is where the silver iodide is. And off to the side is a huge propane tank. Over here is the redneck version. This is the kind that they've been using since 1948 when Irving P. Crick invented the first manual ground-based cloud seeding generator. It's simply a big propane acetone tank with a silver iodide burn head on it. And an elderly gentleman who's probably been doing it for the last 30 years walks out there, flicks a Bic over top of it, and turns it on. This is not very high-tech equipment, but it is everywhere. So when you look at the size and the scale of all of this, all of these fire icons that you're seeing right now are cloud seeding generators. Texas has the largest number of cloud seeding projects by state, and they probably have one of the longest histories of it. What you're also going to notice that pretty much east of the Mississippi River, there have been almost no cloud seeding projects since the 1950s. There are very few exceptions to that rule. Some of them, just as I think the last operational cloud seeding project in Florida, which is currently passing legislation banning cloud seeding, was 1981. But generally, and that project did not work. That's why they never did it again. So weather modification projects in America, at least, are all on the western coast. Even up here, you guys are in Alberta, you have what's called the Alberta Hail Damage Mitigation Project, Alberta Hail Suppression Project. That is run by Weather Modification Incorporated, which is also known as Weather Modification International. The list goes on. But this is a worldwide map, so clearly, these are all of the different weather modification projects across the world, and that does not include the Himalayan mountains, where literally China is covering all of Tibet and the Himalayan mountains in one large cloud seeding generator. You can see it right here. This red area is covered in 100,000 cloud seeding generators. It is right now disrupting weather on a worldwide scale. Nobody's even aware that it is a thing. But China covering Tibet in thousands of cloud seeding generators. China needs water, so it's building a rain-making network 3 times the size of Spain. That is an actual Chinese cloud seeding generator right there. And this is all of the rivers that are fed by their operations there. So mapping it out is another good way to get information across, but then I have a frequently asked question page specifically about the chemtrails, because I think that this is one of those categories where people are really confused about who's doing what and why. When you really want to get down to it, metals detected in jet exhaust. These are the metals that are found in jet fuel and their exhaust. All of these metals lead to cirrus cloud formation. I have spent 20 years doing this. And I have been sent thousands of pictures of bottles, pipes, pumps, sprays. Every single one. I will stake my life on this. Every single photo I have ever been sent, I have found what it was, and it was never a chemtrail bottle. I have found adulticide sprayers. I have found ballast tanks. I have found water fire suppression systems, oil dispersant systems, modular aerial spraying systems, military systems, none of which were ever on any commuter flight that I've ever tracked, let alone was making clouds. But if you look at the contents of that, chromium, iron, molybdenum, sodium, calcium, aluminum, vanadium, barium, cobalt, copper, nickel, lead, magnesium, manganese, silicon, titanium, zirconium, all detected chemical characterization of freshly emitted particulate matter from aircraft exhaust using single particle mass spectrometry. Jet aircraft produce about anywhere from 10 to 100 quadrillion ultrafine particles per second. That's 10 to 100 with 15 zeros behind it. Nanoparticles per second while they're flying. The Indian Space Organization found black carbon, which are the particles, the main particle that carries all the metals, at 18 kilometers in the stratosphere, and that there were 10,000 for every cubic centimeter. So even though the planes can't fly that high, the chemicals that are coming out of the planes actually goes up into the stratosphere. The reason why is because once you get into the stratosphere, it gets drier and it gets warmer, and the chemicals can actually self-levitate. This is called photophoretic levitation. Not going to nerd out on the terminology, just trying to give you guys a broad overview. Given the shape and location of these particles, it could derive only from the emissions of jet fuel. Source of that, possible climatic implications of high altitude black carbon emissions from the ISRO Vikram Sarabhi Space Center in the Indian Institute of Science, India. When they broke this paper, the entire scientific community had a collective, fit. And that was released just in 2017. People are still trying to scratch their heads over this paper. Then I have all of the frequently asked questions: on-off clouds. What's in it? Is it poisonous? Can high bypass turbofans make clouds? How are clouds melting the poles? You can totally get into this stuff. This is literally 3 hours worth of material if I start clicking these buttons. But are they dangerous? Why not? Jet fuel additives like biocides, leak detectors, corrosion inhibitors. I have the material safety data sheets for every single chemical that they add to the jet fuel. And I'm going to go and tell you this. Whenever you see things like this that say Sera 3 chemical, that is a cancer-causing carcinogenic additive. Almost all of these say something very similar. It's either a Sera 313 or a Sera 3 or there's another term for the a lot of them say trade secret ingredient also. So they don't even disclose to the public what they're putting in there. Sulfur hexafluoride was banned during the ozone scare, yet they still put it in planes. So all of these chemicals are pretty dangerous. Sera 313 chemicals are cancer-causing chemicals like trimethylbenzene, naphthalene, almost in all these. The other term is CERCLA. When you're seeing these in material safety data sheets, you're talking about very toxic chemicals. These are only the fuel additives that they put in. And here is an appendix from Exxon Mobil that literally shows you all the different types of jet fuel and what is required by military standards, by commercial aviation standards, what chemicals go in each one. As an example, Status 450, the static dissipator, which is dinonyl naphthyl sulfonic acid, DENZA. It's required in every fuel. Why? Because in Vietnam, the Viet Cong were able to shoot their AK-47s at planes, and those planes would then explode. So an example of the PowerPoint presentations, and I just want to go through this one briefly. Carbon black dust versus black carbon. It's either CBD, and I'm not talking about cannabinoid oil, CBD or carbon black. What's the difference? Why does it matter? Because one's used for weather warfare. The other one is jet exhaust. And not knowing the difference is the reason why we have such a confused populace. They're well intended, but they don't understand the difference between carbon black, which is manufactured, and black carbon. So I want to briefly just go through the history of this. One has military use. One is used in. I have Freedom of Information Act requests from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, from China Lake Naval Air Warfare Center in California, and both of them say the same thing. We use carbon black dust for weather warfare. Don't believe me? Let's get into it. Soot, heavy metals. I went through all of that already. So I'm just going to rip through this really fast because there's a lot of slides and I don't want to go over all of them, like photophoretic levitation of engineered aerosols for geoengineering. That's too complicated for this short time that we have. I want to show you the important stuff. So let's get to that. These are maps of all of the radars, laser beams, and high-powered multi-million watt radars around the planet that are heating the ionosphere. But let's go through a little bit of history. So back in 1958, for those who don't believe this is a thing, in Palm Springs, California, jet trails, dim sun, Palm Springs gripes. The contrails are not disappearing, but are breaking down into a haze and creating a cloud-like appearance in the sky. With the unlimited expanse of barren, uninhabited land in the west, does such activity have to be centered over a resort area which is offering the visitor cloudless skies and unlimited sunshine? The Air Force so far is flabbergasted. This was December 6, 1958. 1 month later, January 1959. Air Force gives village two choices: live with the trails or move. This is contrary to everything you've ever heard on the internet. You will never hear this from anybody else on the internet. I got a little schedule pop up to take trash. I got to take the trash out of the road before I go to bed tonight. Reminders are great. Let's face it, men, said a crisp-talking, star-studded general. You'll either have to live with the vapor trails or move the city of Palm Springs. The resort area, it appears, is known as the Palm Springs intersection, the freeway interchange of all West Coast aerial traffic. So the city officials and civic leaders, in an apparently unanimous unspoken agreement, decided a peaceful coexistence with the Air Force was the wisest course. So for those who think that chemtrails are a new thing, or you're telling yourself, I remember blue skies, but this could never have happened in the past, old newspapers say differently. Old timers say differently. I've actually interviewed, half my family lives out in California, and some of them were alive when this happened. Simultaneously, same year, 1958, Navy scientist creates clouds, breaks them up. This time, it's not pollution from planes, it's carbon black. Dr. Florence Van Straten, we dropped carbon black suspended in a liquid over a track a mile long and produced a solid line of clouds 1 mile long. When we dropped 1.5 pound dry packages of carbon black, we produced single clouds with each drop. The Navy team seeded 7 clouds with carbon and dissipated each of them within 2.5 to 20 minutes. Each cloud turned gray and then rapidly disappeared. Aside from the cost of the airplanes, we spent less than $5 on the experiments in Georgia. So the military was able to create these clouds that we are seeing on demand using carbon black dust. What is carbon black dust? It's what's in ink, the toner cartridges in your laser jet. It's the black stuff they put in tires when they vulcanize rubber to make it black. Carbon black is manufactured. Black carbon is exhaust. That is when you burn a fire up and you have soot, that is carbon black. President John F. Kennedy said in 1961, we shall further propose further cooperative efforts between all nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. And Lyndon Johnson said it lays the predicate and foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer. Did he mean determine as in realize it, or actually have the determination to control it? And ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. That's not all, he said. This is the one you never hear about from Lyndon Johnson. Control of space means control of the world. This is about space weather modification. From space, the masters of infinity would have the power to control the Earth's weather, to cause drought and flood, to change the tides and raise the levels of the sea, to divert the Gulf Stream and change temperate climates to frigid. He's literally talking about raising the levels of the sea. I thought global warming was going to do that. He's talking about turning temperate climates to frigid, literally making ice ages from space. Let that one sink in. In 1972, Illinois and New Jersey sued the airline industry over what they called smoke pollution of the skies. This was the state of Illinois and New Jersey suing the airlines for chemtrails 1970 through 1972. You can look up the case law on this. This actually happened. Did it change anything? No. On the possibility of weather control by aircraft contrails, it's likely that contrails are affecting precipitation to a much greater extent than our present deliberate cloud seeding operations. This was published October 1970. The obvious has been stated for far too long. Most people are just unaware of it. This was by Wallace McCrae, who wrote on the possibility of weather modification by aircraft contrails, and links are all provided in here. And then William Gray said, using carbon black dust, we can steer hurricanes. Weather modification by carbon dust absorption of solar energy, that carbon aerosol particles, 0.1 micrometer to 100 nanometers or less. Because they're black, they absorb heat, just like the black paint on your car. So you can dump carbon black particles into a hurricane and steer it. This is about acid rain. If you're old enough, you know. If not, you don't. But acid rain, I'm 48. When I was in middle school, high school, that's all they ever talked about. We don't talk about acid rain anymore. Now, to the military side of this, carbon black dust, in Spacecast 2020, which was top secret, I got a copy of this from the Black Vault. They blacked out an entire page, and the only thing left was previous Russian weather modification efforts. This demonstrated the ability to generate infrared defeating clouds, effectively denying overhead surveillance, blocking out spy satellites in space, and the ability to see heat signatures of people on the battlefield. In this Freedom of Information Act request, it's titled Weather Modification Using Carbon Black from the United States Air Force Phillips Laboratory, dated 1994. This is from the United States Navy. Over here, you can see their cold cloud modification system bombs, which were used in Vietnam and in Project Storm Fury, where they were steering hurricanes. These are cloud seeding rack flares. This is literally a liquid nitrogen bottle, and these are bombs that would deploy these flare racks. But again, non-lethal warfare proposal, weather modification, Freedom of Information Act request from the U.S. Navy, 1994. We had weather as a force multiplier owning the weather in 2025. Most people may have missed it, but right smack dab in the middle of the document was a future technologies they're going to make. And here it says 2005 CBD. Down here it says CBD equals carbon black dust with a star next to it, technologies to be developed by DoD. So the two FOIAs I just showed you mentioned carbon black dust. They were using carbon black dust in 1958. And in owning the weather in 2025, they said very clearly, we will use carbon black dust. And everybody would say, well, that was just a paper. It was a think piece published by the Air Force. Why would you even point at that? Because Dr. Arnold Barnes Jr. actually went to the Test Technology Symposium 97, where the United States Army and the United States Air Force met, and he gave a PowerPoint presentation on this. And he said the use of carbon black to retarget precipitation, fog dissipation, and cirrus enhancement. Cirrus enhancement. So he goes and reiterates the things from that we did in Vietnam during Operation Popeye, doing muddy dirt roads to call what they called "Make Mud Not War" was the slogan in Operation Popeye, to create floods and to create droughts using carbon black dust. This is called overseeding. So you can either make it flood or rain on demand. But more importantly, when we're talking about the chemtrail issue, increase cirrus cloud cover. Now, it would be one thing if he just said weather modification using carbon black to increase cirrus cloud cover, which is what we're seeing, but he told us why also. To deny visual satellite or high altitude reconnaissance. If you've got that brand new shiny SR-72 that they just told us about, and it's on the runway at Area 51, and you don't want the Russians or Chinese to see your brand new shiny spaceship, spy plane, then you can create clouds that the satellites cannot see through, and then you can fly under them when you're doing your test flights. The other reason, decreased light level for nighttime operations. During Desert Storm, the Iraqi Republican Guard did not have night vision goggles, but we did. So our military could go out and block out the moonlight, and that would give us a strategic advantage. So using carbon black dust to create chemtrails that block out moonlight, let alone sunlight, is a strategic advantage. And they say so right here. Interestingly enough, Dr. Arnold Barnes is from the Phillips Laboratory. The Freedom of Information Act request was from the Phillips Laboratory, and all of the documents say engineering design of airborne carbon black delivery system completed 2004. So this is not even a what if. It has happened. They can do it. But we have to balance that with what we are seeing in the skies. In 2004, there were 23 million flights globally. In 2019, there were 43 million flights globally. When you look at what's in jet fuel and how it burns and what it actually ends up being, examples over here, JP5, calcium, 5,000 parts per billion. JP8, 31,000 parts per billion. For those who don't know that calcium is a metal, it is a metal. Aluminum, 2,100 parts per billion. JP8, 9,300 parts per billion. This was part of what's called the NATO single fuel concept, where they switched from JP4 gasoline to kerosene and exponentially increased all of the metals that we're seeing in the skies. And I'm going to pretty much end right about here. In 2008, the DHS Hurricane Modification Workshop reiterated the point that using carbon black aerosol, like William Gray had said in 1974, Mosh Alamaro from MIT University proposed dumping the black material in here. And here's an infographic of how that would work. Soot is warmed by the sun, heating the cool air around it at the very top of the hurricane, reducing the flow of air within the hurricane and slows it down and can change the direction of a hurricane. So to say that the Department of Homeland Security said they wanted to prevent the next Katrina because it's a threat to Homeland Security. Therefore, we should do hurricane mitigation. Meanwhile, Donald Trump said China has a hurricane gun, and everybody laughed at him. You shouldn't be laughing at all. So the rest of this is really on how, the history of science behind contrail evolution and how it all occurred. There's just a couple more slides, but jet biofuel enlisted for contrail control. Right now, they're using what are called biofuels and sustainable aviation fuels to try to control where contrails appear. And do they turn into cirrus clouds? Do they block out the sun and that has a cooling effect? Or do they linger at night and that has a warming effect? Right now, the airline industry is being threatened by carbon taxes. So in order to get carbon credits and carbon offsets, they're quickly trying to use all of these different types of biofuels, from HEFA processes to Fischer-Tropsch, everything from Jatropha biodiesel, formed from crushed seeds of the Jatropha plant, water, and a surfactant, then blended in different proportions of alumina nanoparticles. This is literally what's going on. This is the stuff nobody wants to talk about. Nanoparticles should be used judiciously because they tend to entrain in human bodies and brains. We all know this, but nobody knows where it's coming from, and they don't want to understand the complexities of it. That's why I put this together. And in 2015, me and my friends went up to the EPA and we actually testified in front of the EPA. This was aired on C-SPAN August 11th, 2015. And while everybody was arguing over whether to vote for Trump or Hillary, the EPA agreed to limit greenhouse gas from airplanes and possibly regulate metals and cloud production. But then Obama's White House released the Federal Alternative Jet Fuel Research and Development Strategy. China, U.S., and Europe pledged support for Global Aviation Emissions Pact. And then they dropped a lawsuit, and later on, NGOs slam UN Aviation Agency plan for biofuels. Check out Biofuels Watch for information on that. And that was a younger me and a much less stressed out me testifying in front of the EPA, saying you don't care about cancer-causing heavy metals and fuels and their additives or aviation-induced cloudiness. They didn't then, they don't now. making them listen. That's why I asked Monty the question, is this a states' rights issue, and can we override the federal government? Because we all know the farther you get away, the less they care. But to the scientific community, 2 examples right here. MIT Technology Review, talking about ship tracks. We're about to kill a massive accidental experiment in reducing global warming. These are ship tracks. They are very similar to chemtrails, except they are way bigger. They tend to be anywhere from 20 to 50 miles wide, and they're thousands of miles long. They produce marine stratocumulus, which are loaded with sulfur, and they cool the Pacific Ocean. But in 2020, the International Maritime Organization banned bunker fuel, and all of the geoengineers and all the climate cultists out there had a collective including MIT, that we were going to stop polluting the sky because they like pollution if it's going to cool the planet. And then over here from Smithsonian Magazine, airplane contrails may be creating accidental geoengineering. Isn't that ironic? Don't you think? So when you read this stuff, this is actually Chuck Long, who wrote a paper called Clear Sky Daylight Whitening. Are we already conducting geoengineering? Chuck Long happens to be one of the top scientists on the planet. He passed away recently, but he worked for NOAA's Earth Systems Research Lab and said that basically we're creating an ice haze, which is whitening the sky. And it's coming from jet fuel. Period. End of story. And nobody really wants to talk about it. Here's all the people who talk about doping jet fuel, and the list goes on. And these are the access flights where they actually tested the doped fuel and the biofuels for contrail control. I'm going to leave off there on that because I just want to summarize now. I know we got other speakers, but you can follow my latest stuff like diamond dust geoengineering. The fact that geoengineering programs are getting shut down as we speak, Hands Off Mother Earth, the ETC group, and those guys. I've been a member, working with ETC group since 2010. They have stopped not 1 but 4 geoengineering projects to date. In fact, they're the only group on the entire planet who has ever stopped even 1 geoengineering project. So if you have not been to geoengineeringmonitor.org, please go there and sign up for their newsletter so you can see some real activists who are doing a hell of a fine job. And also check out their map.geoengineeringmonitor.org. But that's why we're now in December 11th, 2024, and finally they are creating a geoengineering early warning system. This has been an official announcement right on the heels of ICANN, which is the Informed Consent Action Network run by Dell Bigtree's Highwire, did a look into a project called SABRE. And SABRE is the Stratospheric Aerosol Processes Budget and Radiative Effects. They did a Freedom of Information Act request on this project and then very quickly realized that these people are flying these laboratories up into the stratosphere to figure out how much geoengineering is going on today and can we predict it in the future. Because if another country is to do this to us, it could be a real problem. So they also have the Balloon Baseline Stratospheric Aerosol Profiles, B2SAP program that's running. And all of this is the U.S. is building an early warning system for geoengineering. As you can see here, New York Times paywall and all that. But this is new news that they're trying to scoop under the rug. Finally, I'm all about the new administration working with anybody and everybody. That's why I, offered to help Benita with some possible draft legislation to help out in Alberta. I'm currently helping 12 different senators in 17 states. 12 senators, 17 states on their draft legislations. And I was nominated for the Maha Forums to be part of Team Kennedy. And apparently I got the top votes in the category. I hope to be hearing from RFK. That would be freaking epic. But I was nominated for the environmental and natural resources section. If you go by votes, I'm still way up at the top. And I'm hoping to be hearing from him anytime in the near future. I just had one of the Trump transition team lawyers reach out to me, and then I'll be able to use this information that I have, not just to inform people like the good people who took the time to listen to me run my mouth and share all this stuff with you today, but to inform the federal government how badly they've gotten this wrong, how mad people are about it, and how we need to take action on this. And that's not the only action I'm taking. The Environmental Modification Accountability Act, climateviewer.com/NMOD, is an addendum. It is a fix for the Environmental Modification Convention, the weather warfare ban of 1976. This is one of my solutions. We have to deal with this on a United Nations level because they passed a weather warfare ban in 1976. They never made any way for you to catch somebody doing weather warfare, let alone geoengineering. So this is one solution. The next solution, obviously, would be a states-based solution and a national ban on geoengineering. And I would imagine that the same would be true in Canada if the provinces ban geoengineering, if Canada at a federal level bans geoengineering, then you have something that you can actually work with because geoengineering is a world problem, not a local problem. Finally, like for anybody who wants to be able to connect with any of the stuff that I just showed you, I made a simple website page for you to go to, connect.climateviewer.com. And on there, you will see all three of my websites that I just showed you, whether it's my blog, the weather modification history, the maps, my Substack. You can join our Telegram chat, be part of the conversation, be part of the solution, offer solutions, or come in there and tell me how I got everything wrong, which I absolutely love because I'd rather be told that I got something wrong today and learn some new things than continue to just spout off the stuff that I've known for absolute years on end. And then all the other regular social media stuff and ways to support. But all of my stuff, one page, so you guys can check that out and get in touch with me at any time in the near future. And, I always look forward to new people joining the Telegram chat because we always get unique perspectives when people will come in. And a lot of people come in specifically to say, here's what I'm seeing in my local neighborhood. Here's some photos or here's some videos that I made. And when they do that, we like to give them personalized information. I'll never forget the day that Kat came in and joined our Telegram chat and was like, these GD planes on the GD, this and that. And I'm like, I know exactly how you feel. And and a lot of people do that. And you know what? It's great. Like I enjoy passionate people. I'm going to butcher it, but that line from Alice in Wonderland, all of us are crazy, the best people are. So if you're not a little bit crazy by now from just trying to wade through all of the information on the internet, then you're not doing it right. You need to try harder. I've been doing it for 20 years now. I'm certifiably crazy. Trust none of what I just said. It is your due diligence to go out and fact check everything I said. Be skeptical of it. Don't trust me because I'm a shill. Just so you know, I work for the Illuminati and they bought me the finest double wide trailer in Sumter, South Carolina ever. I have a gold plated double wide trailer, Sumter, South Carolina. These are facts. This guy works for the freaking Illuminati. And because I'm Alex Jones, I'm telling you, don't trust him. You come someplace else. Go talk to anybody but this guy. He's trouble. Do your own homework. I love you, mean it. Thank you for listening. I hope I made this entertaining because a lot of this stuff for me, a lot of people get beat down by the information. They really do. They get beat down by the tone that people have on a day in, day out basis. We're all going to die. The biosphere is dying. You know, the UVC is going to kill us all. You know, the chemtrails, they're slowly putting nanobots in us and all. You can only take so much of this stuff. So you have to keep an open mind, and you have to be able to laugh a little bit and take a breather and then get back to it.
And Jim, you did that for us. You made us laugh. I want to cram in a couple of quick questions and then get our next speaker on. Our meeting is late, but so
I'm sure Lloyd's like looking, going, how much longer are these people going to run their freaking mouths? I see it in your face, Lloyd. Love you, man. I'm sticking around just for you, dude.
Okay, I'm going to cram a couple fast questions to you, Jim. On your map that you were showing us earlier with all those little icons and stuff, there's something here that is like an eyeball in a pyramid. So the eyeball in the pyramid, what is that?
Those are actually lawsuits.
Oh.
I can bring it back up real quick if you guys want to see.
Okay, well, we just wanted to know what it meant. So it meant lawsuits. So there's lawsuits pending in Nebraska, Oklahoma.
Those are examples of lawsuits. I don't know why George chose that icon out of all the other ones, because that icon specifically is from my Illuminati spy surveillance network map. But you can see here, North Platte court case, year 1960, Somerville versus North Platte Valley Weather Control District. Background, a landowner with a legal weather control district, but lived outside, and then the law right here. So basically, these are examples of lawsuits that have happened over weather modification over the years.
Hey, we're going to jump to the next question, Jim.
Okay.
Have you helped Lee Gilreath, SC House? Does that sound familiar? Lee Gilreath, that name?
No, and in fact, what's ironic is all of the people I'm helping, they're not in South Carolina. I live in South Carolina, and no, I actually have an entire list right now of all 22 states that currently have legislation going on. We're studying all of them to see what works, what doesn't. I was hoping to speak with Monty about, what he has going forward on that, because we're trying to write a draft legislation that anybody can use, that they can just fill in the dots, and then it come with an appendix that tells you all of the different like when you go and you try to get a law passed, you're going to go to some scientific committee, and there's going to be a bunch of, I'm trying not to curse, tightwads in suits going, well, how do you know the thing that you know? And what do you have to back that up? And you can literally go, that's in appendix D number 2. It's like already in there. Like all the references are there. Quit asking me questions. Have your lawyer get with a scientist, and y'all figure out that all of that's true. Because that's what they're going to do anyway.
I'm loving it. So the last question is, what's your Telegram? And if people want more information, such as that list of 22 states with legislation pending. So those are the last 2 questions, and then I got to cut you because I want to hear Lloyd's message. So go ahead.
The next video I'm making is specifically about the Tennessee chemtrail ban, the trouble they've had with the Clean Air Act, the FAA Act, and I'm going to be listing all of the states that currently have that. So that's going to appear first on my YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, all my video stuff. It ends up on my Substack. So if you sign up for my Substack, all of that, including my Telegram chat, is on connect.climateviewer.com. So if you go there, you'll see a link to all of the things, which is my newsletter on Substack, which will get sent to your inbox. Everything I do is free and open source. So, whenever I do send it out, you'll be the first to know because it's going to hit your inbox. It's the next article that I will be writing. And we're just going to put it out there. I was going to try to collect all the video testimony from all of them and upload those so we could all watch them together and laugh and cry together. But I have way too many things to do. So we're just going to put the list out, and you guys can do that work yourself.
Okay, thank you so much, James. And I hope you'll stick around for this next presenter. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hear from Lloyd in Canada, BC. And I'm just going to share a screen with you for a moment because I want to tell you about Lloyd Manchester. And okay, so it's an entity it's the West Kelowna branch of the KCSA. So the KCSA is something known as Kelowna Citizen Safety Association. So what they did is they did continuous advocacy, and they got the BC government's Ministry of Forests to cancel the controversial 2025 aerial BTK spray program. What is BTK? It's a biological insecticide, caterpillar killer. Okay, so these guys were successful. So it wasn't Lloyd working alone. Lloyd worked with a whole team of motivated people in West Kelowna, British Columbia, concerned about what's going on in the skies, and they pushed back. So West Kelowna was spared. They were successful, but 12 other communities weren't as fortunate, and they underwent the aerial spraying, sparking significant health and environmental concerns. And so Lloyd is president of the West Kelowna branch of the KCSA, and he praised the decision, emphasizing the importance of community education and regulatory reform. So there's a pattern here, folks. We've been hearing this from basically all our presenters, how important it is to have community education, to gain the knowledge, share the knowledge, and then push for those policy changes. And there are ways to push for policy changes, and that's where I come in, because I've achieved policy change in other areas, and so I'd like to train you. So we're not going to get to all that today, but we will get to Lloyd's presentation. And so I need to now invite Lloyd. And Lloyd, I'm so glad you could be with us. And I'm also really glad that you're patient with how long things went. Go ahead. Oh, did I lose him? Yeah, I know. I'm trying. Oh, try again. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's Lloyd from Kelowna, British Columbia. Go ahead, Lloyd.
Thanks, Benita. That's really great to be here. I've watched you for Jim, I've watched you for years. I've followed your stuff. You've really been and always are informative. You really know your stuff. And I've used a lot of it in different presentations I've made over the years. I'm a few decades older than you, but you're still looking pretty young for your age. But anyway, I guess I just really briefly, I come from a background in pesticides. My young family, was sprayed with malathion, an adulticide to kill mosquitoes, and I didn't think that was very good. I ended up, this is cutting it really short, taking our regional district to court and suing them for violating the Pesticide Control Act, of which they pled guilty to, and then they were put on probation, and they never sprayed malathion again in the city of Kelowna. So it was, and that sort of started me off with aerial spraying of Roundup, and fighting in watersheds against the aerial spraying. And I did basically our multi-issue environmentalist, 25 years with my own organization, the Canadian Earth Care Society. And I fought a lot of pesticide battles. And anyway, I think, I know that all of that work, saving the planet, prepared me for what I do today, which is to fight at the grassroots level, and that's the kind of organization I have, is grassroots, and helping people to fight these battles. It only takes a few people to win some of these battles, but it takes dedication, and it does take work. With the BTK battle, what we're dealing with there is, again, it's a similar thing. It's not the chemtrail thing, but it's spraying pesticides out of a twin-engine airplane, flying over communities, and most of it is without informed consent. So people are and they're spraying like 3 times for the gypsy moth. Now now politically correct made the spongy moth, so that people can't get too upset about the word gypsy. But anyway, it's just a diversion. The BTK that they're spraying, or in fact, has 87% of its formulation unknown. We sort of know the different emulsifiers and those kinds of things in it. But as for the exact toxicity of the full formulation, uh, much is not known. The bottom line here is that people are being sprayed with, unknowingly. So early in the morning, and they look up or they hear a plane. The next thing you know, this plane's going over, and they're looking up and they're being sprayed. And many people have reactions and get sick as a result of exposure. A lot of people don't even know that they've been exposed. And we know many, many different people over the different operations and the health reports that have suffered serious harm from it. They try to say it's all biological and everything's okay. But again, it's a bacteria. When you're exposed to it, you become inoculated. Once you're inoculated, you have no idea as to what the full formulation means and what it can potentially do for you or to you. So what we did was that in the West Kelowna campaign, is that we launched a major campaign. We used leaflets, we used pesticide-free zone signs, we used I went specifically after the Workmen's Compensation Board here in BC. They had pesticide regulations for employers, but it didn't account for actual aerial spraying. So and with that, going after all the school boards in the province, all the what they call PACs. It's the teacher groups that are in all of the schools. Went after them with letters saying how are they going to protect the children? Were they, what were they going to do with the pesticide residue? Were they going to shut off their air conditioning vents? Were they going to, in fact, actually stop, protect the children? We had one school district in the city of Cranbrook that did do that. They didn't do much, but they did actually take some steps. They made the children take their shoes off, not track it through the schools after they were sprayed. Very little health monitoring going on with any of these applications. And in many areas, like for Cranbrook, for example, in the spray area, there were 13 daycares, 6 schools, and a major regional hospital, all within the spray zone and the spray drift zone. So one of the things that aside from the advocacy on the ground and talking to counselors, we were refused to make presentations to the West Bank City Council. They just said, forget it, we're not talking to you. We don't deal with health. This is out of our jurisdiction. This is a common theme of municipalities, school boards. This isn't our jurisdiction. It's the provinces, and it's okay, and all this stuff. And that's obviously, as we all know, a cop-out. But again, putting the pressure on them, having different people calling them does make a difference. And going after the bureaucracy within the government, really important. They're the ones that are promoting these programs. And again, this program is a really sort of insidious type of program because we have an agency in Canada called the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, called CIPA. And that one is involved with the WHO Animal Group. And they are working on, I think they even have, I was just looking, somebody in their Substack was saying that they have connections to the UBC laboratory in BC. And they're potentially, and I'm saying they're doing it, but potentially gain a function research on the H5N1 vaccine that Canada just bought 500,000 doses of. But again, they're looking at the transmission between birds and humans, and then what they're doing in the meantime is culling all of the birds. So millions and millions of birds in BC, across Canada, and most likely the United States as well. I think there's millions as well there that are being destroyed. And again, this is all being coordinated through, the United Nations, the WHO, and ultimately the WEF to ensure that they get these chemicals sprayed on human populations. And again, there's a connection there, and I'll just mention this briefly. But we have 400 ostriches up here in Edgemont, British Columbia, that the Canadian Food Agency wants to kill and slaughter. They've tried to hire hunters to do it. And again, we've been, letter campaigns. There's, as Kathryn mentioned, she's been doing interviews on consistently. So have the universal ostrich people. But again, the same kind of agency promoting these chemicals that are being used on humans and ultimately trying to get a pandemic going there. So again, I think it's important from the grassroots level to, continue to fight these things. We're looking at different aspects of how we not only just more presentations to councils, but I think that the basis of what we need to do in all of our municipalities and all of our provinces and all of the states down in the United States is take back our cities and start making these people accountable. They are not accountable to the public or, as Monty said, we the people. They're not accountable. They just get to do whatever they want. They can hurt and harm our health, and they actually there's no recourse to go back at them other than to continually bother them and make them understand about these issues. An interesting time I had with Geoengineering was doing a town hall on geoengineering in Rock Creek, BC. Very interesting. A lot of farmers are there, and the farmers are definitely concerned about geoengineering. The farmers are concerned about spraying BTK on the land base and potentially sterilizing the soils and whatever else is in the products. So there's a concern overall. Jurisdictions, as I said, just so it's not in our jurisdiction. But it's our plan to look at that and say, you have to listen. So it's encouraging people to go speak to their councils, go speak to their school boards, and have presentation packages. One will be about geoengineering and what's going on in there. One will be about the spraying of pesticides in your communities, or if you have fluoride in your communities or whatever it may be, is that we have to get on the ground, get more people motivated, and realize that they can actually change, and they can change history, and they can change the world. And I'll give you one other example of that. When I was running my organization in downtown Kelowna, a semi-elderly lady came in with a whole stack of papers, and she walked in, smacked them down on my desk and said, "You've got to do something about fluoride." And I said, "Okay." Next thing you know, we're doing pamphlets up, and we're, talking in the community, talking to city councilors. They held a referendum in the city of Kelowna. And what happened? This woman, I got to give her the most credit of all. She did every single day from the time she walked into my office to the time she got those pamphlets. She was out every single day. She was talking to people. She was handing them out, and she was stirring up that conversation. She did it single-handedly, basically. And we had the referendum, and we won. Kelowna never has used fluoride since that time in the 1980s or 1990s. So again, it shows that groupings of people, if they band together, and that's why we created the Kelowna Citizen Safety Association, and then a branch in the West Kelowna, and we're going to have a branch in Lake Country. And we want to empower people with the same kind of information, so we're not all trying to create this stuff over and over again. We want reliable information we can all use, and we put the pressures on the municipalities and that. And basically, as one of the Kathryn, one of your techniques is you put their picture out, you put what they've done, you put their record out. We have a thing called the politicalscorecard.ca, and we're intending to use that. We used it in the provincial election in BC, and it basically has a record of the voting record of all the politicians. And it actually does it for the federal ones in BC. And now we're going to do it for our communities, so that all of their records are going to be public, so that they have to step in front of their people and start pledging their oaths, for one, to the people, and they need to start acting for the people. and not being controlled by the provinces or the federal government. And the more we stand up as the people on the ground, the more we will win these battles. And the more wins we get, the more we empower people, and people start to realize that you have the power. And when you take it into your hands, you don't know how good it feels to have, to be able to actually beat these guys at their own game. And it just shows that we can continue to do that, put them in their places. And if they want to be elected officials, whether it's in a province, whether it's in a municipality, whether it's in a state, is that they have to act for the people. And the ones that don't need to be turfed out, and the good ones need to be put in place. And that's the way we're going to change the world. And, as Jim was saying, when I spent 25 years doing environmental stuff, and it was like the world was ending every day. And the way I looked at it was, I knew the world wasn't going to end. And I knew there were forces a lot stronger than me out there that were not going to let that happen. And that I was just part of that, and proud to be part of that, because I've been doing it all of these years for my children, now my grandchildren, and I want a future, and I see a future. I see us being able to reverse what's happened on this planet. I see us being able to change it with people like great guys like James Lee and all of you that are doing this stuff on the ground. You are the ones. You will do it, and we will change the world to a better place and put some sanity and bloody common sense back in place, because it's all gone out the window in Canada. I mean, we're totally out on the way other end there in commie land, basically, where we've got a prime minister that's, just, a disgrace to our country. And pretty soon we're going to have a prime minister that isn't even elected in this country. So I never get depressed about this stuff, because I know ultimately we will win. And every time you hit an obstacle, you just get stronger, and you keep moving forward, and you keep talking to your friends. And if you get burnt out, then talk to your friends and don't let it get too far. We need to save ourselves, because the battle is at hand. It's happening right now. We're all privileged to be on this planet at this time on Earth, on the Earth's history, and we're here for a reason. You are all here for a reason. I know what my reason is. Maybe other people don't quite know, but just being here is reason enough. And you are the ones that will help change the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I'd like to dig in for just a moment about some of the specific actions that you took in Kelowna to make the change. So my understanding is there was at least one flyer distribution campaign, signage, speaking to town council, petitions. What were some of those actions? Can you just share with us at least one of those actions?
Well, I mean, what we did was we went directly to the schools and we started handing pamphlets. We realized that, a lot of people my age, grandparents, are picking up their students and their kids, their grandkids and they park in these parking lots and start talking to them, letting them know the spray was going to be happening, that they needed to keep their kids in. And they were actually a lot more receptive than the parents on the whole. So it was talking to them. That was one of the things we did. We delivered pamphlets on cars in parking lots in West Kelowna. We went to some of the soccer events and stuff like that. We had people handing out pamphlets there. We had pesticide-free zone signs that people put on their lawns. It was just basically we engaged the West Bank First Nations to help us in fighting, and they ended up getting into a separate negotiation with the province, which delayed the spraying. So it was and we had support, some small support from the school board, from continually haranguing them, harassing them, letters, and people being able to use those letters and that kind of stuff. So it was a combination of a whole bunch of factors, but mostly it was, our team in West Kelowna that got out there and did this, and that's what you got to do. You got to be on the ground. You got to let people know. I mean, and you got to have fun. I remember, I'll just tell you a quick story. We're trying to stop the spraying in city parks in the city of Kelowna. So what we did was we took a whole bunch of red tape, and every time we're going to spray it, then we just, we get about 10 people out there and we just cover the whole place, like all the entrances off with red tape. We went into the radio station and we recorded a commercial to the Outer Limits theme, like picture, if you will, red tape and pesticides, on the lawn type of stuff, right? And then it would run on the radio, and then people would go on red tape, and then the city would run around, tear all the red tape around, and then that started the actual process of notification, informed consent, where they would actually put a sign up and say which pesticide they were spraying on that particular park. And it was like Keystone Cops. I'll just tell you a quick other one too, is that this guy was going to spray the school grounds. So somebody, and I'm not sure who, put red dye in a spray tank. And anyway, he starts out spraying, and then we run out there with one of those live dolls. So it's a doll that's about 3.5 feet high. Sit her down on the lawn, and we got pictures, cameras, and we're taking pictures. He's coming towards the doll. His face is getting weird, like, is this a little kid in that? And meanwhile, his spray hoses are just covering the whole lawn with red dye. It was actually organic red dye from England. But anyway, he ends up stopping. And then that was it again. That was the last spraying they ever did on the city school district 23 in the city of Kelowna. That was enough to actually put it over the top. But you have fun doing that stuff. It's kind of exciting. And then you actually change the world at the same time. So that's kind of cool.
So, Lloyd, would you agree that although, yes, this is a global problem, making a difference at the local level matters? And so for example, I run a session this Thursday, and I want you as a guest presenter, actually, talking about local activism. So in this case, I call it Conservatizing Municipal Councils and School Boards, Strategies for Influencing Policymakers and Replacing Them. We need to engage with our elected reps at all levels, including the local level. And when it's election time, we need to take part in the elections. And my view is voting alone is not enough. It's not enough just to vote. If you actually believe in something, you want change, you have a candidate you're going to support, then take the action and be part of the campaign, whether that's door knocking or handing out flyers or supporting events, whatever that is, donating. So, Lloyd, is that something you would support as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's I firmly believe that the only way we're going to take back our countries, our cities, is to take our cities back, and have the people at that level advocating, because they'll move up into the provincial system. It'll all become integrated, where people will start to be getting really good people in these positions, and not crooks and people that don't really care about you and are being controlled by global influences. It's the first start of stopping the global influence at that municipal level. They spent decades. I mean, I've witnessed the global warming stuff. The acid rain. Talk about that, James. It was like that was the mantra when I was starting out in the environmental movement. It was like, oh, acid rain's going to destroy the planet, and on and on. But yeah, definitely at that level, which spreads into the provincial level. And then and to me, the theme is accountability. And as we make them more accountable, then that ensures that starts to happen as we go along. And that's why it's great what's happening in the United States, because it's like going after, the corruption and the coercion and that kind of stuff. And we need to do that in Canada. We need to root out all of that evil, and it is evil. And when it comes to evil, and that's why I'm an optimist, I believe the light will win, and we are the light. Whether believing in God, believing in the Creator, whatever it is, we're all in it, we're all connected, and we will win it.
I love your positivity, Lloyd. I feel that too, even though we in a sense, take our hits. There's items of discouragement. We need to celebrate our wins. And although the group you were working with there at Kelowna, I mean, you had plans that you would have a positive effect in Cranbrook and in other areas as well. That didn't quite pan out, but we're still celebrating the win of West Kelowna. And so by celebrating our wins, so you take Monty Fritz, for example, and this this House bill that was passed 2063 became a state bill. It became law. That's another win, right? It doesn't mean we've totally won yet, but it's another win. We celebrate the win. We try to have a few laughs along the way. So I'm loving that. At this time, I'm going to invite all our presenters from this evening, James and MellowKat and Monty, if you have any additional remarks to share. We'll start with MellowKat. Kathryn.
Lloyd, you are my hero. I have a friend in Kelowna, and I just sent her a message and said, get to know Lloyd Manchester now. He is doing incredible work. Was such a pleasure to hear about all of your efforts. And you really can make a difference, and you're doing it. And just see everybody, it's one person, maybe a few people, and just how much they can make an impact. And the more of us on board, the more, I mean, I see this moving us forward. I just see this really positive trend toward this awakening that everybody's having. I've known personal people that have come across, to my side finally after a few years of struggling. I'm feeling really inspired and very hopeful. There's always more to talk about, but I look forward to seeing you, Benita, in future meetings. And I hope to connect with some of you here on this chat. You know where to find me. And Benita, this meeting is wonderful. You have such a wonderful turnout, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here. So much love to you, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Oh, you're muted there, Benita.
Let's hear from James now, and then Monty.
Lloyd, I followed you too. This is not a one-way street. And when I heard about you, I was like, that's freaking epic. So I too am taking local action. I got in touch with a guy from Florida, and when I went to the local pest control board, we have trucks. I don't know if you have the mosquito spray trucks in your local area. We've had them since I was a child, and this has always been something that's been on my radar. When I went on Del Bigtree's The High Wire, I briefly mentioned the aerial spray program at Youngstown Air Force Reserve Base. And Del Bigtree and Aaron Saari, their lawyer, did a Freedom of Information Act request with the U.S. Air Force and got 2,106 pages of aerial spraying, pesticides, herbicides, naled, dibrome, the list goes on and on. And these are the types of things that we don't even think about when we think about being sprayed regularly from the air for uncontrolled substances that you cannot avoid. I think you pointed it out perfectly. Shutting your windows does not protect you from this. I tell my kids, I'm like, run inside, turn the air conditioner off. I hear the trucks coming. They don't notify the public. They don't give us any protection from us. And then they pacify us with, oh, this is safe. Meanwhile, if you have beehives, you can go look at them being decimated, and you know damn well it's not safe. If it's killing the bees, it's definitely killing the mosquitoes, and it's probably harming you. You look into naled and dibrome, and then you quickly realize this is an everybody problem. In the state of Florida, I got in touch with a friend of mine who put me in touch with somebody in Florida who their county switched from using naled to mineral oil. And mineral oil is just as effective at killing mosquitoes and has no effect on the bee population or humans at all. So I then went to, our local DHEC department and said, well, how about you guys get with these guys and they'll tell you who they get their, mineral oil from. And then I don't have to worry about hiding my children from your poison spraying trucks when they come rolling down the highway. So kudos to you for bringing this to the forefront. When I talk about chemtrails, I talk about all the things because chemtrails means different things to different people. And most people are completely unaware that the logging industry is another major source of aerial herbicide spraying. These are the things that we never think about until they're brought to your attention. And it's kind of like, buying a Volkswagen Beetle, and then when you drive down the road, everybody's driving a Volkswagen Beetle because now you notice them, whereas you didn't before. So bringing this to people's attention will definitely, now you can't not know about it. It's your job to look into your local municipality and see what you can do about it. Start local. Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves.
Oh, James, you have me so excited. You guys all have me so excited. So just imagine for a moment, there was like a billionaire listening to this event right here, and they're like, I want to help raise awareness for geoengineering across Canada or across the US or across the continent. Imagine if we had money to spend and pretend we became the core leadership team, the group that's here today, because we seem to really gel with one another well, and pretend we crafted some ads to help raise awareness. And so we ran one ad campaign for 3 weeks, and then we changed the ad and we ran another campaign for 3 weeks. And we actually bought ads in the media that attempts to report against us, right? I've actually done this. I'm speaking from personal experience. I became an activist in 2021, and I was in opposition to the COVID-19 restrictions. I paid for ads in newspapers that were reporting against me. Those newspapers essentially got bribed by the federal government to report a certain agenda, shall we say. I paid for ads to counter that, and they let me buy those ads. So just imagine for a moment we did that, and we reach an audience we wouldn't otherwise reach, because the followings we have, well, they're already in our mindset, right? So anyway, that's just me wishing I knew a billionaire who wanted to support this cause, and that's one of the things I do with the money. Let's go to Monty now. Monty, what remarks do you have to share with us?
I so appreciate y'all letting me join you tonight. This has probably been some of the best time I've spent this week. I turned the camera off and worked on other bills that I'm working on, but listened in and just James, you and I have not met yet. I think Benita's going to share my phone number with y'all that want it, if that's of use to y'all. I spend lots of time on this topic, but I'm only like this deep compared to some of the things you all talked about, right? And I try to encourage my constituents in the state that this is probably much worse than what you just see, because we fixate on the stripes in the sky. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't look up. I think Miss MellowKat's comments, but it is, and it goes back to what's been twice mentioned. I know I mentioned evil, and I know Lloyd mentioned evil. It is that. I don't know what drives that, what kind of crazy desire drives and fuels that. But I do think folks are a little bit more willing to talk about it now. And I think much of the credit, I appreciate the thoughts about getting a piece of legislation passed in Tennessee. But 20 years, James, you've put into this. And obviously you've become an encyclopedia of knowledge. That's pretty awesome. And Lee Gilreath is one of your state reps. He's talked to me a couple times. He has some interest in this. When we talk, I'll get you his phone number. And he's new, and he seems to be a really conservative guy. Many of these politicians are afraid to step in front of this bus because there has been so much skepticism now. But I think as work and just the boldness to go confront the airline pilot like Miss MellowKat did, that's pretty cool. And, lots of people see that. And I think that we're learning, and I'm not good at this yet, but we're learning that we don't have to have ABC or CNN carry the story. This whole internet thing has opened up the news to a whole different realm. And as we figure out how to use that, I think it's made it more conversational. So my all that to get to these closing thoughts, I appreciate what all y'all that presented tonight have done in this. I appreciate it for the fact that my grandkids might breathe cleaner air, and back to the thing that Lloyd and I both mentioned, God didn't make us to be subservient to some wicked, evil person who wants to do things to us without our consent. I expect to go out of this world just like I come into it, a free man. And so I think that's better enabled by what you folks are doing. So I appreciate y'all.
And we appreciate you as well, Monty. Thank you. That is Tennessee State Representative Monty Fritz, ladies and gentlemen, initiator of House Bill 2063, which became a state bill. And of course, it passed last year and became law. It's part of the momentum. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I appreciate you so very much. My name is Benita Pedersen. I'm an activist near Edmonton, Alberta, and I am determined to achieve policy change. And I've already gotten results in achieving policy change on other issues. And so now it's time to address geoengineering, weather modification, pollution in the skies. And so what I like to do is I like to talk to the people who've already achieved some success in that area or in a related area, be educated and inspired by those individuals. And so if geoengineering is one of your top issues, it's a top concern to you, make sure you mark your calendars right now for March 25th. We're going to have another meeting. We may feature some of the same presenters from this meeting, plus some new faces. We're going to be touching on carbon capture at that meeting as well. So it's not all about what's going on up there in the skies and the atmosphere. We'll be talking more about what's going on down here as well. And so make sure you're registered for that, www.tinyurl.com/addressing geoengineering. So register for that. If you register at that link, you will also receive the tools from this meeting. So you'll receive notes from this meeting. You will receive the recordings from this meeting. And we encourage you to share that out. Share it out. Give it to everybody. Anybody who will listen, anybody who will take it. So share it out, watch it, review it. The more equipped you are with knowledge, then the more equipped you become to engage with the people who don't yet have the knowledge. And I really like something Monty referred to earlier, and it was about using grace. We meet a lot of people who they don't have the same insights we do. They've been preoccupied with other things. The way we win is by winning them over. And so we draw them in, we introduce them to our views. It doesn't have to be this hostile thing. You've probably experienced that when you have a viewpoint on an issue and somebody else has a different viewpoint. Sometimes it can just get really hostile. The walls go up. No communication takes place. So the way we win is by winning people over and by having conversations, introducing them to information. Hopefully they'll listen. Maybe be conscious about overwhelming them because people get overwhelmed easily. Sometimes all you can do is just plant a seed and then walk on, and hopefully that seed sprouts. Maybe someone else talks to them later and the seed sprouts and gets watered by another piece of information they get. Some people, before they'll consider a piece of information, they need to hear it at least 3 times from 3 different sources. If they hear it 10 times from you, makes no difference. They need to hear it at least 3 times from at least 3 different sources. Then maybe they'll start to consider it as truth. So don't be discouraged. Be like Lloyd. Stay encouraged. Keep taking action. Inspire others to take action. One of the things we need to do is build teams in our respective areas. So if you're serious about taking action, then I have a team building tool for you. Now, I made this mainly for Canadians, but Americans can sign in as well. And so what it is it's a tool you filled out, and I help, because I get your postal code, I help you build the team in your area. And so the link to that is www.tinyurl.com/teamconservatize. So that's one of the ways we collect data and we build the teams. So thanks again, everybody, for being here today. I'm Benita Pedersen. I'm an activist. I'm with allfiredupforfreedom.com. I'm also with the Alberta Conservative Association. I'm also a member of the United Conservative Party and the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm involved with multiple groups. I take action in multiple ways. And at a later date, I'm going to host a session on composing policy. So we'll hopefully have some of these folks on there giving us some input. But One of the things I've learned about elected reps is they don't just want complaints, they want solutions. So you can't just complain. And if you have the solution, which may mean you've already written the proposed amendment to a policy, and all they got to do is present it and pass it. If you come forward with solutions, you're more likely to make the change. Remember that elected representatives are just human beings like you and me, and they're fallible like you and me, and sometimes words of encouragement go a long way. So if you have appreciated the presentations of any or all of these presenters tonight, or the presentation of myself, make sure you send out some messages of thanks and encouragement, because those messages are sometimes what help us carry on, because this can get stressful. So make sure you send out those messages. And if you would like to financially help support this, I do pay many, many hundreds of dollars a year for Zoom. So if you would like to financially support the good work I'm doing, fire off an e-transfer to petersenbenita@gmail.com. That would help, right? So I'm not always paying out of pocket. So thank you again, everybody. Thanks for being here. See you hopefully this Thursday at the Conservatizing Municipal Councils and School Board meeting online, where we talk about the difference we can make at the local level. Also, our next meeting on geoengineering is March 25th. In early April, we're going to have a session on parliamentary procedure. We're also going to learn about how to present yourself professionally at municipal council meetings. And so, yes, I hope you'll sign up for all that. You can follow me on Facebook. Just look up my name, as long as you spell it right, Benita Pedersen, Benita Pedersen. If you find me on Facebook, then you can follow, in general, all the stuff I do, including this online stuff, is promoted there. So it's, I'm attempting to just post that in the chat, but I guess you can see it on the screen as well. So we're good. So I think we're good.
Benita, real quick, you said we're gonna get a copy of the Zoom call.
Yes, this has been recorded, and it's going to be released possibly as one long file, but we might actually break it up and release it as shorter files. Plus, I've had my AI assistant going, which means my AI assistant is composing notes on this event as well. So we're going to release that in the coming days too. So as long as
I will shoot this video out to around 100,000 followers.
Oh wow!
As long as I'd like to put it all together, because I think that all of it is everybody made a great presentation, and I don't like to chunk it up into little bits and somebody get more attention than the other. I think the group as a whole really shows a wide range of beliefs and, activism. And it would be great for people to see it together. And I just want to really quickly reiterate what Monty said at the beginning. Not everybody has the same religious views, but I personally believe that God created a perfect system, that we are stewards of this planet, and it is our job to make sure that, as Monty put it, evil does not prevail. The people that are doing this, they may not feel like they're evil. So I would encourage everybody to attack ideas, not people. Though we may disagree with the people who are doing these things, they are people. They may feel justified. They may feel like they're the good guys. But at the end of the day, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. So I applaud everybody who's, if you've taken the time to make it to the end of this Zoom call, you care and you're part of the solution. So resonate that truth with other people and start simple. I start very simply by walking into a gas station, and I ask a 75-year-old black man, I said, "What's that?" And they said, "That's a cloud." And I said, "Have you ever seen a straight cloud in your life?" And they say, "What is that?" And then I walk off. Because planting that seed, that's how you get them started. You can't convince anybody of anything, but you can definitely get them to question their own beliefs, and then they will take the journey that a lot of you already have. So find your unique way to communicate this to people. Share it in weird and awkward ways, and especially at the dinner table when everybody tells you to shut up. And thank you for everybody who attended this.
Thanks, James.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone. Monty, I didn't know you were still on the call. I wanted to also say thank you so much. I look forward to looking into you and supporting your efforts. And it's so lovely to see a representative expressing these views and concerns. So you're just probably the first of many, and it's a pleasure to meet you on this chat.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. It's been great.
Yes. This was amazing, Benita. Thank you for everything. Have a beautiful night. I've got a little one to put to bed and my chicks to put to sleep.
You have to put chicks to sleep? How do you do
I've
that?
been hatching chicks because of the fake bird flu, and I don't want to deal with another shortage again. And so I'm hatching unjabbed chicks, and they're all healthy and happy and amazing. And I'm hoping just to secure food in our community. So yes, my babies.
Go on.
All right, I'm going to sign out. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Good night, folks.
I hope you reach
Everybody.
out too. I'll see you soon, Benita, again. Thanks
Bye-bye.
again. This was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye,
again to all our
everyone.
guests.